Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller, and we are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, Daniel Tate from Energy Alabama talks about their work. Science says managers suck, and the more manager you are, the more you suck. Amazon workers won a big victory last week, and the company continues to flout the law. Coal miners are still on strike in Alabama, and more on today's Valley Labor Report. If you want to be part of the program, we've got a phone number, and the line is open. The line is open. This is why we like to be live. We are live today. We've pre-recorded the last couple of shows, but we're live. If you want to call in and talk to us right now, you can do it. We're live in person right now, real time. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week, open to any sort of comments, questions, or concerns. Do you have a question about unions? Do you want to tell us about a win that you had with your union or without a union? Do you want to yell at us because you're triggered? We love it all. We love it all. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap here on the radio, or you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you've got to follow us online. We're all over anywhere online. Facebook, YouTube, podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. And just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining member of the program, make a one-time donation or buy our new hat, you can go to tvlr.fm or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. Our new hat is almost finished with production, and it'll be shipping out, I think, next week. I think it'll be shipping out next week. So if you want to get the hat as soon as possible, you need to go ahead and place your order now. Otherwise, it's going to take a little bit longer because it's going to have to ship to me, and then I'll have to ship it to you. Where if you place your order now, or if you've already placed your order, the hat will come directly to you from wherever they make it. In like Kansas, I think, is where they're making it. So, also, if you're a member of a union, you should get your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to me for more details on that. We went 3 months where we were not in the red, which is very cool. That's nice. It's nice. But this month we are still a little bit under, and mostly that's just because I need to hit up some of our sponsors to give us money again. But yeah. So if you're a member of a local, then you should get your local to sponsor the show. That really helps us out. In addition to being a sustaining member yourself. So,
or if you belong to a club or neighborhood group, any sort of advocacy organization, if it's something where you think we have some overlapping interests and overlapping goals.
A business, a candidate, anybody. Or just a person. Just if you just as a person want to write us a check every month and say whatever you want to say, that's fine. I don't care. I'll take money from anybody.
That would be interesting. Yeah, if you want to write your own commercial.
Just write your own commercial. My name is Joe Smith, and I'm a really cool guy. Maybe you need a girlfriend. I don't know. That's something. Maybe we could be like a dating.
No, that's not. No. I'm vetoing that one.
You don't want to put like commercials for like eligible bachelors?
This just, let folks leave it to Craigslist and wherever they are on the internet. We'll stick to our thing, but we
if
really
you think
appreciate.
if you disagree with Adam,
please
then
contact Jacob. Yes.
Then let us know. 844-899-TVLR.
I'm going to go ahead and put that out there. That's a general rule. If you have any complaints, issues, questions, especially if it's anything I said, contact Jacob. Send them to him.
Roll Tide.
He'd love to read it.
Roll Tide. All right. So first up, Energy Alabama is a nonprofit membership-based organization that has advocated for clean energy in Alabama since 2014. Their work is based on 3 pillars: education, advocacy, and technical assistance. Since their creation, they have helped businesses, schools, nonprofits, homeowners, and even renters decrease their energy usage. They've taught more than 12,000 Alabama students about sustainable energy. They have facilitated the construction of over 900 kilowatts of solar. They helped Alabama power consumers get $100 million back, and they're a proud sponsor of the Valley Labor Report. We're happy to have them. Daniel Tate is the executive director of Energy Alabama and our next guest. Daniel, thanks for taking the time to talk to us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Daniel, one of the things that y'all are really proud of is your education of students and adults about the opportunities that do exist for renewable energy. Can you talk to us about, like, that work?
For sure. Our work is, primarily education, I would say. Out of the 3 things that you mentioned, education is probably the most important. And that's just getting out there and talking to regular folks at events around different communities, getting in and talking with students and helping folks understand about the career options and, how to get further education. As you mentioned earlier, probably the most important thing, right, that a lot of people think about when they think about energy is paying a utility bill. And I don't know about anybody else, but I try to make sure and want to make sure that number is as low as possible, right? Mm-hmm. So, helping folks understand the things that they can do, and also some of the policies that they can advocate for that help to reduce costs of energy, make it cleaner, and be good for our economy. So all those types of things are what we're doing, in schools and out in events in the community.
Yeah. So, the educating folks about the options that they do have. Why do you feel like, why was that the thing that you wanted to pursue? As there's all sorts of stuff that that you could do, and that does need to be done as far as the energy sector is concerned. Why is education the thing that you wanted to kind of single out and go after?
Yeah, for us, it was really, when we founded the organization back in 2014, it was those 2 first buckets were the biggest ones, education and advocacy. And what we meant by that is, we knew we had to teach people about, what renewable energy was, what energy efficiency was, what the options were, what it could do, and what it can't do, right? So I think there's a lot of information out there, sometimes intentional, sometimes not, right? Just, the questions, for instance, that we get from people today are very different than the questions we got from people back in 2014. Then it was, does this stuff even work? Is it real? Is it magic fairy dust? Today, we get questions more like, how the heck do I actually do this? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? How do I find a contractor? So we really felt like we had to be a resource to help people understand how to go from point A to point B, how to actually make improvements on their homes, how to actually make improvements at the local school district, local school buildings and things like that. So a lot of the work that we've done has actually been with other nonprofits, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're giving money to a nonprofit organization or you're a taxpayer, you want that money to go to educating kids. You want that money to go to service of whatever that nonprofit's mission is, maybe helping the homeless or feeding the hungry. You don't want that money to go to paying utility bills and overhead, right? So that's right. What we try to help people understand how to make that happen.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Well, so give us one of those, those education seminars that you give to people when you're talking to people about the options that they have. What is some of the information that you go over? Give us, you've got these day-long seminars. Give it to us in like 3 minutes.
All right, give me the hard question there, right? All good. We can do it. We can do it. So I think the biggest thing is there's probably like 2 or 3 buckets that people can really focus in on. One is there's a difference in terms of if you're a homeowner, what you can do versus if you're a renter, right? And so a lot of times, if you're a renter, you may not have a lot of control over the property, over the things that you can do. And so we try to, give folks a list of things that they can do that are inside their control. And by the way, I'm happy to share that. We make that, publicly available. So anybody who has questions about that kind of thing, we're happy to make those resources available. And then if you're a homeowner, we help connect for energy audits and energy efficiency experts to come in and tell you where, your specific home can reduce. Oftentimes, at least from what we see in North Alabama, a lot of times that's air sealing, insulation, and duct sealing. A stat that still absolutely blows my mind even to this day is that most of the times that I've seen duct tests, so they come in and they blow pressurized air through your ducts, right, to see how much air is actually leaking into your attic or your crawl space. And, I grew up and my parents would say, close the door, you're born in the barn. But we often find that is exactly what's happening, right? And in fact, most of the houses that are tested, 30-40% of the air that you're paying to condition to make cool or hot is just dissipating out into the attic or the crawl space. So it's just wild, being able to spend a few $100 to tampen that down, it'll save you a lot of money, but most importantly, make you more comfortable. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of this can be about money, but a lot of it too is like, do you want to be comfortable in your own home? You want your HVAC to do what it was designed to do. So things like that, we step people through like how to do it. And that a lot of this stuff is not that expensive. I mean, you do have to make some investment, but we're talking about in the scale of hundreds, if not low thousands of dollars to, save a good bit of money every month and make you more comfortable. And renewables are another issue that we deal with a lot, and it's a lot harder in Alabama to make those things happen than you see in many other areas of the country. And that kind of leads into some of our advocacy and policy work, because we have to kind of get some bad policies off the books and some good policies on the books to be able to make those options more cost effective and open and accessible to a lot of people in the state.
Right. And one of the things that impresses me about folks is when they give advice that maybe isn't actually, that is best for the person that they're giving the advice to, but is maybe not best for their organization or whatever. And so I was asking you about solar power for my parents, and they live in and basically you told me that, well, where they live, the woods that are around them, everything, it actually wouldn't really make sense where they're at. And that kind of stuff impresses, the integrity of the advice that your organization gives and the education that they give, that I think kind of speaks volumes, that you're actually going to not give people advice or education that is going to specifically push a quote unquote agenda or like make y'all more money. You are trying to help the folks that you're educating.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, we don't sell a product, right? As the nonprofit kind of education group, what we're trying to do is, spread the information and make sure that people are protected. I mean, I'm not going to lie, right? Just like with any other field, whether you're talking about HVAC or roofing or whatever it may be, there are companies or contractors that will take advantage of people, and we don't want to see that happen. And so if someone has a product to sell, I'm not saying that everybody who has a product to sell doesn't have integrity. That's not the case, but that you just have to understand everyone's motivations. And there are times when renewable energy or specific upgrades are not the best for a particular location, a particular family, and people having a bad experience with energy efficiency or putting solar panels on and not getting what they expected, not seeing the savings that they expected. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help trying to move the industry forward. And so that's what we're, part of the education that we're doing is you just got to be open and honest with folks. And a lot of times about what these things can't do and make sure that people don't have unrealistic expectations going in.
Yeah. I mean, the like you said, when somebody's got a product to sell, there is an incentive there, and even if we say that energy or renewables, these are maybe, we'll say, good industries, they're still run by owners and bosses and stuff and capitalists, and so there's John Oliver had a really good segment about the predatory nature of some of these solar power contractors, and so actually knowing what is going to help you. What is going to help your company or your nonprofit or you as an individual, you as a family, as a consumer. That's something that's important, and I think that your organization does have a lot of integrity in that kind of in that vein. And so beyond education, you do actually education is kind of your primary thing, but you do play a role in the facilitation of renewables. One of the things on your website is that you have facilitated the construction of more than 900 kilowatts of solar. What does that look like exactly?
Yeah, so this is kind of where education and that facilitation or technical assistance come together. And I want to flag for folks, anyone who's listening, or whether now or later, that this is a resource that we provide, and we are happy to look at. Like if someone is going solar and they have quotes and they're looking at technical documents and saying, what the heck does this mean? Is this a good deal? Is it not a good deal? Like, this is where it comes into, we can help and look at that and say, well, based on what you tell us and what we see here in front of us, this is a good deal. This is not a good deal. Or you should ask the contractor these types of questions to make sure that you get the protections that you need. And so for facilitation for us has primarily been that kind of advisory role, primarily for other nonprofit organizations and or small businesses. And so oftentimes, people, they hear things and they say, hey, renewable energy sounds good to me. Want to try to do it. I want to try to figure it out. I don't know where to start. And that's really where we've been trying to help folks to say, okay, what's the opportunity? Kind of like how you reached out about your parents, and in cases where it is potentially a good fit, we work with those businesses or the local government or the school district, depending on, who reaches out for help. And we go to contractors and say, this is what we're looking at. This is what this particular customer is looking at building. Give us your best price. Tell us what you want to do. And then we kind of go over that with someone to say, you have three options on the table. This one doesn't look so hot. I wouldn't do it if I were you. And these two look pretty competitive. And your decision should be based kind of on these couple of variables. Do you want a panel that's made in America? Do you want panels that have a 25-year warranty instead of a 20-year warranty? Things like that is what we're going to try to pull out for folks to say what's important to you and help you make that decision. And that's really what we've been doing.
Yeah, and the machinists in Decatur are actually looking at buying a union hall here in the next year or so. So that's a service that would be available to unions and locals that have halls in Huntsville and across the state as well. You want to, because when we pay dues for our local, or when we pay our utility bills for our local union halls, that's coming out of our dues. And so, we want to, if we can spend less on the utility bills at our union halls, we can put more of that money into organizing and or membership services, stuff like that. So
I think that's a fantastic idea, Jacob. And I would encourage anyone listening, if you're not sure if your local has done anything recently with your local union hall, reach out to Daniel in Energy Alabama and see if maybe y'all can get an energy audit or just get some feedback on how you can reduce the utility bills of your local hall and just be more sustainable with the physical property that you have.
Right. So beyond the advocacy and the education, y'all actually fight on behalf of consumers as well. One of the things that you mentioned on your website and you say in your ads that run on our program is that y'all helped to secure $100 million refund from Alabama Power. Can you talk to us about that and your organization's involvement in that case?
For sure. A lot of people think about sustainability and they think about it in an environmental sense. They think about, how am I going to save the trees and the polar bears? And don't get me wrong, those things are great. But at the heart for us in sustainability is about people. If it doesn't make economic sense, if it doesn't make sense environmentally, but also if it doesn't make sense for people, it's not a strategy. It's not something that is going to hold long term. And so for us, advocating on behalf of consumers is a no-brainer. This particular thing was not necessarily about renewable energy or energy efficiency. It was just the right thing to do. In theory, in Alabama, the Attorney General's office is supposed to be the designated consumer advocate at the Public Service Commission, a regulatory agency that most people don't know that directly affects the utility bill of the vast majority of Alabamians, especially in the kind of Birmingham and South area of the state. And so essentially what happened in this particular case is that right after COVID, struck in, March of 2020, y'all will remember that, gas prices at that time, if we can even fathom it right now, were extremely low. And essentially the power company was over collecting in terms of how much money it needed to pay for gas, natural gas that it was using to generate power. So there's this fund that we, most consumers that are Alabama, if you're an Alabama Power customer, pay into to pay for the gas. And that fund was, in excess of $100 million over collected. So it was a lot of money just sitting there essentially that had no bills to pay. And we couldn't think of a better time to ask for a refund of that money, in the sense that, you're talking about the middle of 2020, a lot of people out of work, still not knowing what's going to happen, because, the whole world was much more uncertain than it is today, and it's still pretty uncertain today. But so we petitioned, essentially, we sent a letter to the Public Service Commission saying, y'all have the authority to order Alabama Power to refund all this money to customers. So it's customer money. It's something that we as customers paid into. They don't need it anymore. Give it back. And they did, largely gave most of it back. I think it was about $100 million out of about 120 that had been over collected. And so most Alabama Power customers got a credit to their bill for the proportion of the money that they had put into that fund. So we felt like that was really important. And, the other thing is, I'll add that the fuel cost that Alabama Power collects is largely based on the price of gas. So while we are doing this, trying to get money back for consumers that they have overpaid, we are simultaneously advocating for using less gas. Alabama Power has, over the last 5 to 10 years, been over-reliant. And a lot of people think that most of their power comes from hydroelectric dams and nuclear, but it's mostly gas. And you can see today, when we have been saying for years that gas prices will not be low forever, they will come back. Things will happen. They are volatile. And I hate being proven right in a case like this, where, we got money back, but at the same time, we wanted to reduce the reliance on gas so that if prices came back up high, that customers wouldn't be hurt. So we got the refund, but the other parts were ignored, right? So gas prices came roaring back, and here we are with customers being hurt again, when we really should be reducing that reliance.
Right. Yeah. Well, so how do you feel like that work? I think that you kind of explained it there, but if you want to elaborate a little bit further, how do you feel like that sort of consumer support plays into your to your broader mission of decarbonization and utilization of renewable energy?
Yeah, it just goes back to it's got to be good for people, right? And a lot of times people think about it in an environmental way, but we do, but it's mostly about people. And if we want to decarbonize the economy, we want to decarbonize Alabama, at the heart of it, if we're not advocating for policies that help the average Alabamian, every family here that has to pay a utility bill and wonders about where that energy is coming from and how it impacts the environment around their home and their family, then we're missing the boat. And that's really where it's at, is if we can be and keep at the heart of all of our work impact to help regular folks, then we know we'll get there. There is no world in which we're going to be successful in pushing policy or pushing changes that hurts people. And we definitely don't want to do that. So that's where this comes from, is that we would rather go slower and help people along the way to make sure everybody can get there, than go faster and leave people stranded, leave people hurt along the way.
Right. David had a question in the chat. Do you know anything about the solar panel manufacturer in Huntsville that went out of business?
Yeah, that was LG. So most people will know LG is a pretty large manufacturer of consumer electronics and things like that. They did have a solar panel manufacturing facility in Huntsville. LG makes some of the more highly efficient modules. And so LG, is my understanding, and I could be a little wrong here, but LG was essentially exiting like solar manufacturing, period, like as a company globally. So I don't think, while it's pretty unfortunate, and I definitely did not want to see that happen. There were quite a few people here in the Huntsville area that were employed by that plant. I do believe they're going to be keeping their jobs and moving to a different area of the company. So that is good. We don't have folks unemployed, I hope. But nonetheless, that did happen. And part of that, I think, was that, at least from my understanding, a decision from LG, like at the very top, to just get out of this business. I'm not going to lie. Manufacturing solar panels is a tough business, and it is a very thin margin business because there's so much competition, especially from China and Vietnam and other places overseas, especially some that are, as y'all probably are aware, the Biden administration has taken some action on Chinese solar panels for use of essentially underwaged and slave labor and practices like that in China. So with things like that have made it pretty hard for American manufacturers to compete. And so that's a big part of it too.
Your organization recently sent out an email about the TVA. Can you explain what y'all are doing? The TVA is doing something else. Can you just explain what the TVA is doing and why y'all are kind of opposed to it?
Yeah, so the TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority is the nation's largest public power utility, and it was born out of the New Deal, right? So it came from the 1930s, to bring electricity to the valley, and this is a huge part of what it did. Is not just about electricity; it's about a lot of other things that TVA provided to make this area usable and for farming, and it's got some history in World War II and all types of things. But the point being there is that TVA is essentially a federal utility, and as a federal utility, and with that unique history that it has, in our estimation, and many other advocates around the valley, been making a series of missteps that are, harming the agency, making things dirtier and more expensive to provide power in the valley. And, we want to see TVA be on the forefront like it was in the 1930s, like it was even decades ago when it was probably the most progressive utility in the country, providing energy efficiency services to regular folks. It was doing demand response and shutting off things remotely, like back in the 1970s, decades before everybody was doing this thing. So TVA, has it in its DNA to be a progressive utility, to lean into these changes and also make them good for everyone in the valley. And I think that's where you're seeing a lot of frustration from advocates like us, with their leaning into technology and leaning into things that are going to raise costs, like new gas plants that we know are not going to run, but for maybe 10 years, but we're going to have to pay for them for 30, 40, 50 years. So we don't want to see TVA do that. We want to see TVA, lean into its progressive roots and the roots that would take care of all the folks in the valley.
Right. So you as folks that are pushing renewable usage, energy efficiency, stuff like that. A lot of folks see that, and we still get on Twitter every time, or a lot of times when we tweet about the coal miners, we'll get some like, I hate Trump liberal, like talk about like screw these coal miners, basically like, oh, you should just learn to code, just learn to code, and it's good that you're out on strike, and it's good that the company's screwing you over because we don't need coal anyway, and that they don't understand that it's metallurgical coal, but even if it wasn't metallurgical coal, it's like, well, they shouldn't, to the extent that we're doing this, they should be taken care of. And your organization has been vocal in support of the striking coal miners. How do you see how do you kind of smooth over that perceived conflict for a lot of these folks?
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about being good for people. And there is no world in which we can transition to renewable energy and crap on miners and crap on the people who built the economy, who built what we have today. That is, first of all, just the wrong thing to do. And it sure as hell is not a sustainable strategy, right? At the end of the day, we are going to burn coal tomorrow, right? So as long as there is coal being burned and there are people that have to work in this industry, we want those people to be taken care of. And you hear advocates like us who are pushing for, you often hear this word, and sometimes it can be used inappropriately, but we talk about a just transition. And what that means is we all know that technology is going to change. We all know that these things are coming, and we all know that we need to do them pretty quickly. And I mentioned earlier about the speed at which we do things, and the speed does matter. But at the end of the day, we as an organization want to make sure that if we are moving away from coal, and like you mentioned, this is metallurgical coal, so it's a little different, but even if it weren't, right, that the folks in these communities have been thought about. There is a plan in place for which they can continue to provide for their families, in which they can continue to provide not just get a job, but have something comparable, right? A lot of times you hear people, and I see it too, and it's crap. Go learn to code, or go learn to do this, or go whatever. And, if there are people who want to learn to code and that's what they want to do, that's great. They should have those opportunities to do that. But a lot of times I see people advocating for, someone who was earning, $50 to $100 an hour, and then, we'll just go work at the Amazon warehouse for $15 there. It's right. These things are not equivalent, right? So we have to be very intentional about how we transition in a way that doesn't take away from those communities. And the good news is that you're seeing, not yet in a state like Alabama, unfortunately, but in some other states, there are closures of coal plants with a plan in place and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment into the coal communities who provided the resource in those power plants for education, for job placement, for training, for social support, and not just for 60 days and not just for a year, but for years and years and years, so that school districts can be taken care of, so that there's not a drop off in road maintenance and school support. All those things matter, and they matter over a long period of time. And so that's the kind of thoughtfulness that I think we have to be at when we're talking about a just transition. People matter. Flat out, people matter, and we can't forget them.
I think that's a great place to end it. Daniel, I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Folks, we've been talking to Daniel Tate, and that was just great information, a great message, that exactly right on point, and exactly the kind of stuff that we want to be putting out here on the show. So we're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. On the other side, we're going to be talking about why science says that management sucks, and why the more management you are, the more you suck. Really, really fantastic study. Really looking forward to diving into it. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. Support for this program also comes from the Ironworkers Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need ironworkers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
IBW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBW is the right choice.
Energy Alabama is a locally operated and membership-based nonprofit organization focused on advancing Alabama's clean energy future through education and advocacy. Many people in charge of infrastructure and building decisions simply don't know how viable clean and renewable energy is, and to that end, Energy Alabama has provided instruction to thousands of adults and tens of thousands of K-12 students across the state, and they are working hard to build careers in clean energy and help everyday Alabamians save money on their utility bills. Learn more about their work and how you can join at energyalabama.org.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys of Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs are proud to represent working people in Alabama and across the Southeast. They have over 100 years of experience representing injured workers in workers' compensation, personal injury, and disability claims. Let their attorneys help you when you get injured on the job. You can find them at www.mtandj.com or 855-617-9333. Let Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs help you when you get injured on the job. Again, the website is www.mtandj.com or the phone number 855-617-9333. No representation is made that the quality of legal services is greater than the quality of legal services from other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136, out of Central Alabama. Learn more at IBEW136.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, and my co-host is Adam Keller. We just wrapped we went a little bit long. We're going to have to either condense something or we're going to have to move something into overtime. But we were talking to Daniel Tate. He is the executive director of Energy Alabama. Fantastic conversation about the work that they're doing. He gave us some good information and some really good stuff about how, about how it is actually not conflicting that a renewable energy advocacy organization supports striking coal miners. Fantastic stuff. Great message. If you missed that part of the program, if you're listening to us on the radio and you're like, oh, hey, that sounds like that sounds like an interesting thing. Man, I'm bummed that I missed that. Well, that's fine, because we're on YouTube and Facebook and wherever you get your podcasts, and you can listen to anything that we say on the radio It's all up there, so you can go back and listen to it later. So find us there at the Valley Labor Report. If you've got anything to add or you have a question for us, you can give us a call. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. So, I'm so excited about this. Did you hear that management is worthless? It's true. Everybody knows it. Management is worthless, especially if you have gone to school to be management. Especially if you've gone to school for management. The National Bureau of Economic Research, NBER, conducts, you guessed it, economic research, okay? They dropped a paper last month titled Eclipse of Rent Sharing, The Effects of Managers' Business Education on Wages and the Labor Share in the U.S. and Denmark. But, that's a really
sounds like something a National Economic Research Bureau might come up with.
Yes, definitely. But basically what they did is the researchers looked at the U.S. and Denmark because of the vastly different circumstances in the two countries with respect to labor's bargaining power and the political norms. And what they wanted to do was take a look at the effect of management's business education on wages. That's like if a manager has a business degree, they have an MBA or something, what does that do to workers' wages? So they looked at the U.S. and Denmark to try to figure that out. So if they can prove an effect in both of these countries with the vastly different kind of political landscape, labor landscape, then it strengthens the argument that the cause they are looking at, which is management education, is in fact causal, right? The correlation that they're looking at between management education and workers' wages, if they can prove the correlation in both of these situations, it makes the case stronger that management as education is causal. You will not be surprised to learn that the main effect of a manager on wages is that it the main effect of a business degree of a manager on wages is that it lowers them. Specifically, within 5 years of a business manager, quote unquote, which is what they call managers that have a business education, within 5 years of a business manager taking over a company, wages decline by 6% in the U.S. and 3% in Denmark.
And just to be clear here, you're talking about the wages of the employees, not the managers' wages themselves, right?
Right. So what might surprise you, though, that doesn't surprise me. Like if somebody has a management degree, somebody went to school for management, it does not surprise me that they lower workers' wages. Not surprising, okay? But what might surprise you, and it did surprise me, is that beyond lowering wages, management having a management expertise, a management education, creates no other discernible effects. Meaning that managers with this specialized education do not, and they specifically looked at this, managers with a specialized education do not make a firm more productive. They do not create more jobs. They do not increase sales. None of those things. All they do is create higher profits and lower wages. That's amazing.
And I think that's really something worth hammering home here is does not make it more productive, but can increase profits. Because those profits are coming at the expense of the workers themselves, not because they help the company be more efficient, but because they found ways to squeeze out of labor.
Yes. Yeah, and that's all that they're doing. I mean, they looked at it. They did not produce more. They didn't make more jobs. They didn't increase sales. The only difference is that they were stealing more money from workers and putting it in the hands of the shareholders. It's just amazing. So they say, so why is that? Is the next question. If this is something that's happening, if you get a business education, why is that happening? They say that a big reason from this comes from trends that the two types of managers exhibit when it comes to what they call rent sharing. Or put another way, when a company comes into good fortune through no increased productivity, no increased sales, or anything, just changes in the market happen. Just no fault of the market, they didn't do anything, just the market changes and a firm makes more money. Okay? What do the managers do in that situation? And what about in the reverse? In the reverse situation, where there are changes in the market and a firm makes less money, where changes in the market create a decrease in profitability, wages are cut. This is done by both business and non-business managers. This is done by managers that have specialized education and managers that do not have specialized education. And that's not surprising. If a firm becomes less profitable, they have less money to go around, and maybe we can say that the people at the top are making too much money, but that's not surprising. That's not a surprising result. But when changes in the market create an increase in profit, what happens? For workers under a non-business manager, for workers that work for a manager who does not have specialized education, they see an increase in wages. A 10% increase in profit per worker is associated with a 1% increase in wages. Okay, so if the company benefits under somebody without this specialized education, a worker benefits. That's pretty interesting. For workers under a business manager, for workers that work for a manager with a business education, they share 0% of those excess profits. So if a company does better under a manager with a specialized education, that workers do not benefit. It's just amazing. So being management poisons your mind. Power corrupts, especially when you don't have accountability to the people that you hold power over, right? Power corrupts is kind of like a cliche. Like people understand this, even if you're elected, that it can having power over people can have a corrupting influence over you as a person.
And I think what this is demonstrating is the more you've been propagandized or at least exposed to that ideology of business school and management philosophy, the more corrupt you are going to be. The more you're going to exercise that power over people in a way that's detrimental to the workers.
Right. It's not uncommon to hear stories about, somebody got to get a promotion and their orientation towards the people beneath them where they just were, their orientation towards those folks changes.
Yeah,
just because they got a promotion. Right.
And something that we probably don't talk enough about inside our labor movement is the union office or union staff to management pipeline. Yeah. And it's demoralizing when some folks that used to be your brother or sister who, perhaps were fierce advocates, maybe they were really good as a union officer or union staffer, and next thing you know, they're on the other side of the table because they've taken a promotion or they've swapped teams, more or less. That's something that we have to be cognizant of, and it's something that does happen, unfortunately, way too often.
Yeah. But So just a normal person who gets that kind of power, like, it can change them. But like Adam said, being trained to be management, like, this is what you've spent 4, 6, 8 years of your life learning how to be, learning about ways to wield power over folks, learning about ways to wield power over folks that you have no accountability to. Absolutely brain rotting. Just totally destroys you. So some specific points of the curriculum that the researchers point to being the cause of that are, like, so why is it? Okay, so workers' wages get cut when you have a business manager. And that is because of the way that they do or do not share rents. Why is there a difference in the way that business managers treat rents compared to non-business managers? Well, the researchers point to specific points of the curriculum in business education for this. First, the emphasis on shareholder values, as advocated for in 1970 by Milton Friedman, who stated that the social responsibility of business is to increase profits. Under the influence of folks like Friedman, some managers started viewing workers not as stakeholders in the corporation, not as partners, but rather as sources of costs to be reduced, even more so than they did before. Because I think that was not an uncommon thing before Friedman. But and second, the emergence of a business school doctrine advocating re-engineering and creating quote-unquote lean corporations that entailed identifying and removing unnecessary costs. That started being viewed as an integral part of successful management. So you've got, okay, I've got to reduce unnecessary costs, and employees are just costs to be reduced. Okay, so combining those things really gonna hurt the way that you treat your workers. So for an example in just how the people who are educating tomorrow's quote-unquote business leaders are rotting people's brains, let's listen to how Charles Payne, he's a contributor to Fox Business, reacts to the suggestion that soaring oil and gas profits are indicative of the company's ability to lower gas prices, at least somewhat. Let's go ahead and play that clip, Adam.
Before you go, because we're about out of time, I just want to put this Bernie Sanders tweet on profits for the big oil companies, because I know you have been talking a lot about this. He says, well, hey, look at the profits of these big companies. ConocoPhillips, up 1,400%. Chevron, ExxonMobil, as the gas price increases 63% to $4.24. Your response?
I'm doing a big segment today on corporate profits because they were the best last year since 1950. Profits, yeah. Corporate profits overall.
I got
you know what I say? Great, fantastic, I love it. Profits is not a four-letter word in a capitalist society. This is how that's how we generate opportunity and prosperity for all Americans. And by the way, ExxonMobil last year, their profit margins were 10%.
Charles, people are going to hear you say that and they're going to say, wait a second then. With all those profits, there's going to be room for gas prices, oil prices to come down a little bit.
I'm confused about that.
That they should
Brainworms, man.
He's confused about that.
He's confused about that. So Jeffrey Michaels over in the studio in Athens said that he wasn't hearing the clip. So Ben, if you're listening, if you could help us out with that. I'm not sure what the deal was there. But what that was Charles Payne, Fox Business analyst, whatever. He was reacting to the suggestion that Bernie Sanders made that some of these people, these oil corporations, who we're not talking about small profit increases, right? We're talking about profits. Profits are up 1,400% year over year for one oil corporation. 100% for another, 50% for another. These are huge profit increases. And Charles Payne reacts to the suggestion that Bernie Sanders makes that, okay, this is indicative of like an issue that these companies have, that they are not, these companies should be made to share the profits with the consumer, or maybe even with the workers. And he reacts to that suggestion by saying, I'm confused by that. Like, just the thought that people at the top would not take everything that they possibly could is confusing to this guy who has been his brain has been rotted. Just there's nothing left besides worms crawling around in his head.
Well, Jacob, now listen. That 1,400% increase in profits ought to make you feel like much more opportunity is available to you as an American.
Oh my gosh, dude. I mean,
do you feel the opportunity? Do you see it? Do you smell it? 1,400% growth in profits for that oil corporation, making you feel.
Can you feel the freedom?
Can you feel it?
Can you feel the freedom? That's just seriously just amazing. I mean, that's just fascinating. No, I don't want to replay that for the radio then. That we recapped it. But I mean, wow. Like, confused by it. Like, not even that he disagrees with it, but just like he can't wrap his brain around, like the thought that, he just can't even wrap his brain around it. Brainworms, man. Brainworms. They have been rotted by this ideology of people at the top deserve everything. They don't just deserve everything that they have. They deserve everything.
Well, just to harken back to our conversation with Daniel from Energy Alabama earlier, and he really hammered home that they focus on people. It's about people. But, folks like Charles Payne on Fox Business News, profits come before people. 100% of the time, it is about profit.
Yep.
And there is an essential contradiction between profits and people. Our interests do not align. Certainly not always. And certainly not here in this case where Exxon and Chevron and ConocoPhillips see their profits skyrocket while our gas prices skyrocket at the pump. The ordinary average American who's being fleeced because we don't have much of a choice.
Right. So on to the next story. Last week, working folks scored a huge victory.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely huge. The Amazon Labor Union won the first union election at an Amazon in the United States. And it was not even particularly close. It wasn't even particularly close, which is just fascinating. So the genesis for that campaign really began about 2 years ago in March 2020, as the pandemic was just beginning. Back then, we knew very little about it. We knew at that point, people were like still wearing gloves because they were wondering about like, oh, is this going to, is it going to travel through surfaces? We didn't know that it was like aerosolized. We knew very, very little about it. And Amazon was not taking the concerns of its workers seriously. So many of them staged a walkout, including Chris Smalls, who was fired for it. And according to ALU worker organizers for the Amazon Labor Union, Smalls had a great reputation among the workers. So his firing really kind of further incensed people against the company. From there, Smalls and other Amazon workers created the Congress of Essential Workers. They staged a lot of protests, and they were kind of inspired by the Bessemer campaign to organize at their own workplace. Take some of what they were doing down in Bessemer and do some things differently. But the idea, from my understanding of the reporting, the idea to actually form a union as opposed to do some other advocacy came from seeing the folks down in Bessemer, which is really cool. And so from there, they started the work of organizing their sisters and brothers on the job. And in a certain sense, they followed the playbook. Workers led the way. They mapped out leaders and got them on their side. They had real conversations with their coworkers. They built trust. Workers publicly supported the union, signaling that it was safe to do so. And, those are all like, if you read any organizing manual, if you listen to any union organizer talk about how to organize your workplace, these are all things that like everybody says to do, right? These are all super by the book kind of stuff. But in another sense, they did deviate from the playbook significantly. For one, they were independent. They had no affiliation with a larger union. They're still independent. They intend to remain independent. Chris Smalls announced in a press conference after he met with the Teamsters International president, Sean O'Brien, that they will not be affiliating with the Teamsters. They will not be affiliating with anybody else. They're going to remain independent, even though some of these other unions are now going to be giving them some more backing, some more support. They had little to no paid staff. Compared to like in Alabama, there were like a dozen, I think, almost, between 6 and 12 full-time staff at least throughout the whole campaign. They only spent $120,000 over the course of the campaign. That's crazy little.
Compared to the millions potentially tens of millions being spent by Amazon to bust the campaign.
And they only filed with 30%. So to have an NLRB election, you've got to file to have an NLRB union election, you have to show 30% support. You have to get 30% of the workers in the facility saying, I support the union, I want to be union, and that is what triggers a union election. But the normal advice that organizers have is that you can't file at 30%, because if you file at 30%, then the boss is going to dig out a lot of the support that you have. Like, you're going to only lose support from the amount that you file is the normal advice. And so never file with 30%. You always file with at least 60, preferably 70, 80, 90%. The deviation was public, right? Everybody knew that they only filed with 30%. Everybody knew that they didn't have a lot of funding. Everybody knew that they didn't have paid staff. Everybody knew that they were independent. While it was difficult for people on the outside, people like us, to see the things that they were doing that conformed to conventional wisdom, which created significant doubts among union organizers across the country, including myself, right? I mean, I was thinking stuff like how are you going to reach people with so few people on this full time, without paid staff? How are you going to reach 8,000 workers without full-time staff? I didn't see how it could be done. How will you get your message out with so little money to use? I didn't see how it could be done. How are you going to win an election with so few cards filed? I mean, when they initially actually failed to get 30%, and they had to withdraw their petition, and then they got more signatures, and then they refiled. And at that point, when they withdrew their petition, I was like, there's no way. There's no way these people are going to win. There's absolutely no way. And you know, so I was proven wrong. Another thing that kind of came out after that they didn't do, that was that normally you do, is that they didn't make house visits. Really, they tried it and they said that it didn't really work for them. And instead, what they did is they called people and they met outside and inside the facility. Which, again, meeting inside, they actually, part of their campaign was to use break rooms and stuff as like get-togethers for the union. And this is, this is stuff that union organizers, including myself, I just did a organizer training with the IWW, and the common advice is that preferably do not talk about the union at work. Don't have one-on-one conversations in the break room. Don't have one-on-one conversations on the shop floor. But that's what they were doing, and they were doing it like purposely that way, because that's where it was easy to reach people. So it worked. But it seems that they did the most important parts so well, talking to people, building relationships, that the other stuff, that it just didn't matter. They didn't even that they even contribute their ability to win to some of their deviations. They said that without having a paid staff, without being affiliated with a larger union, they were able to more easily combat the company's line about being a third party, because they were like, we don't have any paid staff. We don't,
right.
We don't, like, what do you mean we're a third party? We are literally the only people on this campaign are Amazon workers.
Right. It's not an institution that's been around for 100 years. It's, not an organization with a headquarters in D.C. There is no way to dispute the grassroots nature of it. I mean, Amazon, of course, tried and will continue to, just as Starbucks is doing. But, it's as grassroots as it comes.
Absolutely. They said that, filing above 30% at an Amazon facility with 150% turnover rate is impossible. So filing at 30% actually locks in the eligible voter pool, right? So if you file at 30%, once you file, that locks it in. So, people who come after that date can't vote. They cannot vote after you file for election. So it locks in the voter pool, and you have like a specific number of people that you have to reach, instead of constantly trying to fill a bucket with water that has a hole in the bottom, right? So, they're really, really cool. Of course, Amazon's anti-union campaign in New York was the same as anywhere else. They said dues are bad. They tried to third-party the union, even though the union was just Amazon workers. They did captive audience meetings. They broke the law. They fired workers. They disciplined workers for supporting the union. They surveilled workers. They threatened workers for supporting the union. They spent millions of dollars, and that's just what's public, on union-busting third parties, including a prominent Democratic consulting firm, Global Strategies Group, which is a firm for which many of their clients have refused to comment on their union-busting activities, including the DCCC, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, Emily's List, and a lot more. Like Iowa Democrats was another one. And none of these people have...
Even Senator Ed Markey has used them, which I was a little surprised by. Now, Joe Manchin, that didn't surprise me, but yeah, it's that's also just another reminder to check who you are hiring. And like, if you're involved in a political campaign or you decide to get involved in a political campaign one day, be aware of the types of consultants and other folks that are going to want your money, and ask some questions and do some homework. Where else are they getting money? Because frankly, as a voter, if you are using a firm that is a very prominent union-busting firm, if this is a firm that is being utilized by folks like Jeff Bezos and Howard Schultz to attack workers, why would I trust your candidate? Why? Why would I vote for a campaign that's willing to do business with such an entity?
Yeah.
I know that's kind of a sidebar, but I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. It's definitely worth noting. And the DCCC, Emily's List, the DSCC, I mean, they should blacklist these people. You can be blacklisted by the DCCC for working with AOC, but not for helping Amazon fight workers.
Yeah.
It's insane. The priorities of these people.
And it's, I think Corey in the chat mentioned this, and I've seen this a lot from other folks, and it just bears repeating. With all the millions of dollars Amazon has spent to try to keep out this union, are you really going to ask me to believe that a fair contract for these workers is going to cost like so much more than that? I mean, and I think that's where it's important to remember that it's not always just about money. They are willing to lose money at times to bust a union.
It's about power.
It's about the power and keeping the power for themselves and keeping workers from realizing the power that we do already have.
Yeah. But, I mean, despite all that, the folks in the Amazon Labor Union, they freaking did it, man. They won.
That's one of the biggest wins in our lifetimes, frankly.
The largest NLRB election win in like 50 years. Unprecedented since like the 30s. An independent union with no funding beating the second largest, most anti-union company in the United States.
And you know what? They harken back to the 30s and a lot of their internal discussions as an organizing committee, as they, studied and did their research and trained themselves. They harken back to that labor movement heyday.
Yeah.
And I think that's worth all of us keeping in mind that what we've been doing for the last 50 years clearly has not been working very well.
Right.
And that's not to say we throw everything out, but there are times in this country where we have been much more successful as a working class, and we have to learn from that and integrate that into our current realities. And it seems like Chris Smalls and all the other, brothers and sisters up there in Staten Island really took that and ran with it. And we're all benefiting from that.
Absolutely.
So I don't think I'm overstating it by saying it's one of the biggest union wins in our lifetimes. And I think it really gave me some energy, gave me some juice, just listening to Chris and the VP and some of the other organizers, and hearing him talk about his experience of being fired and how he bounced back from it, and listening to, I think one of the most important things that they've shared in a lot of their interviews over the past week or so is that don't just quit your job, organize your job.
Yes.
Because you're going from one fire to the other.
Right.
maybe you get paid a little better or a little worse. Maybe benefits are slightly different. But at the end of the day, the problems are going to persist. Management is management. Profits are going to come before you and your other brothers and sisters on the job. And so that's the solution,
Yeah.
That's the solution. We all work together to organize so that we change it and not just search for these individual solutions of quitting and, going from the fire to the frying pan.
Yeah. They've got another election on Staten Island this month, and they said that workers at more than 50 warehouses across the country have reached out about organizing, so we could really see this thing explode. Down in Alabama, we have our own Amazon campaign, of course. The first election was last year. The pro-union workers lost the vote by a pretty significant margin, about 2-1. But because Amazon just could not help but break the law, the election was set aside and another election was called. The election this time was significantly closer, barely 100 votes spread, 900-something no votes to 800-something yes votes. But there are 400 challenged ballots. 400 challenged ballots. It's unlikely that those ballots would change the results. A hearing will be set by the NLRB to determine how many, or if those ballots are going to be opened. But man, that is a lot closer. And that reflects what I was told by Amazon workers here in Alabama throughout the campaign, that the feel in the warehouse was different this time, that there was a lot more support than last time. And you could see the support this time, actually. There was a certain change in tactics this time from last time, because when they were organizing in the summer of 2020, that was a weird time, right? I think that people really kind of forget how it felt before we had vaccines, before we knew more about the virus. It was just a weird time to be organizing and to be doing such an unprecedented campaign. So there was a certain change in tactics. They did begin doing house calls more. There was more conversations with workers. There was more, workers were wearing RWDSU shirts and lanyards and vote yes pins in the facility. Hundreds and hundreds of workers were willing to take photos and post them on social media explaining why they were voting yes to unionize. And the need to unionize, to have some say over how the work is done in Alabama and across the country, but specifically in Alabama, how fast it's done, was underscored in the weeks leading up to the end of the election when Amazon forced workers to continue working during a gas leak and forced them to stay at work during a tornado. One worker commented from Alabama that it could have been Illinois all over again, where 6 Amazon workers were killed by corporate greed. They were made to continue working in a building during a tornado that, as it turns out, did not even meet building codes. So the need to have a voice, to take some power away from management, is underscored every day in Amazon facilities, where Amazon employees are 5 times more likely to get musculoskeletal injuries than at other warehouse jobs. Unfortunately, though, in Alabama, they did come up short. Like last year, Amazon could not help but break the law. Unlike last time, their interference in the election may have made the difference, with the margin being so small. So, so that makes it all the more determinative, them breaking the law. Let's throw that graphic up. Kim Kelly reported that that RWDSU filed 21 objections over Amazon's conduct during the Bessemer, Alabama union election, charging that Amazon interfered with workers' right to vote in a free and fair election. The union has requested a hearing over these charges and the 416 challenged ballots. Of the objections to the election, RWDSU alleges that there was that the company illegally removed union literature from neutral areas, which is a protected right. They allowed anti-union literature to be hung while saying pro-union literature couldn't be, which is illegal. They told workers that they could not talk about the union at work, which is illegal. They surveilled organizers as they were making house calls. They suspended and fired pro-union employees for their union support. And there's more. I mean, there was 21 objections, so there's a lot, but those were some of the highlights. So RWDSU is not going anywhere. They're gunning for round 3, and if the bosses didn't want them around, and they thought that they could get away with winning a free and fair election, then they shouldn't have broken the law. They shouldn't have broken the law. But they just can't help themselves. We had a question in the chat. Do you think that ALU? Let's see, where was that? I remember reading it a little while ago. But do you think that ALU would be a better fit for the Bessemer Amazon than the bigger ones, than RWDSU trying to organize it? And I just don't know. I think ultimately
that's up to them. That's up to the workers at Amazon ultimately. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that it's up to the workers at Amazon. I think that I think that.
Maybe there's collaboration opportunities too. I mean, that can be expanded now that ALU has this victory, and maybe after 2 elections with RWDSU, I hope there's some conversations between the 2 groups on how they can help each other move forward.
Yes. Yeah, I hope so. And look.
I think there are.
RWDSU, I do think there are. But look, RWDSU, they have invested in this campaign. They've proven that they're not just some outside group that is only doing this for clout or something.
It's not a fly-by-night operation.
No, it's not a fly-by-night operation. They have invested a couple $1 million at this point into the campaign. And so, and they are the union that the Amazon workers in Bessemer wanted to go with. They decided not to form an independent union. They decided to come to RWDSU to organize with them. So I think that's their decision, but I do think that I think that RWDSU is a good union. I think that the folks that are involved in in that union effort are I think that they've got good motivations. So ultimately, it's going to be the workers' decision, though. So let's go ahead and take a break really quick, and we're going to have to move a couple of things into overtime. Those couple of things are going to be we're going to give an education update on some of the education bills that passed the legislature, and we're going to talk about the Warrior Met coal miner strike. We were wanting to do those in the main show, but we're going to have to push them into overtime because that segment with Daniel went a little bit over, but it was worth it because it was a really good segment. So we're going to go to a break really quick, and then we're going to wrap up with Last Week in Southern Labor. Make sure you stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. Energy Alabama supports consumers and is a leader in advocating for them. They have been able to successfully fight off utility rate increases in the state, reduce fees for electric vehicles, increase electric vehicle infrastructure spending, and they secured a $100 million refund by Alabama Power after the utility overcharged customers for fuel. To learn more about their work advocating for customers and to join the fight, go to energyalabama.org.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBW558.org.
The attorneys of Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs are proud to represent working people in Alabama and across the Southeast. They have over 100 years of experience representing injured workers in workers' compensation, personal injury, and disability claims. Let their attorneys help you when you get injured on the job. You can find them at www.mtandj.com or 855-617-9333. Let Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs help you when you get injured on the job. Again, the website is www.mtandj.com or the phone number 855-617-9333. No representation is made that the quality of legal services is greater than the quality of legal services from other law firms. North Alabama DSA is looking for folks to work for a better North Alabama. They prioritize mutual aid, municipal activism, and union solidarity. Contact them on social media or dsanorthalabama@gmail for more information.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Hometown Action is a proud sponsor of the Valley Labor Report, and we're here to help keep you in the loop on the assault on your right to protest, picket, and peaceably assemble in Alabama. The anti-protest bill is back this year, and it's as bad as ever. There is huge interest in building worker power and increasing unionization in Alabama that has corporations scared. Don't let their influence on our state legislators become another tool to arrest striking workers and union supporters. This racist bill is especially problematic for black organizers and unnecessarily gives law enforcement broad discretion to define even small peaceful gatherings as a riot. Tell your Alabama legislators to say no to House Bill 2. We've set up an easy way for you to do that. You can go to hmtn.link/HB2 where you'll find more information and an email template you can use right from your smartphone. That link is hmtn.link/HB2. You'll also find more info on social media at Hometown Action.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Wealth should go to labor. You are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morris, and my co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can give us a call. 1-866-4... no, that's not the number. 844-899-TVLR. If you listen to the program as a podcast, you can leave us a voicemail at the same number anytime. We've got one ad that we forgot to put in the ad break this week. Gosh, but I'll just go ahead and tell you, the sponsor is Unionly. The sponsor is Unionly, and what they want to tell you is that the future is here, and your union needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. And it doesn't just have to be your union. If you've got a podcast, if you've got a membership-based organization, if you've got any organization, any need to take payment from people or to have a recurring donor system set up, Unionly can help you out. With Unionly, your organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues or when they buy your products at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. And being able to support a union business. So start preparing for your future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io. So let's go ahead and we're going to run through really quick Last Week in Southern Labor. Last Week in Southern Labor is a segment that we do every week where we talk about what happened last week in Southern Labor. We pull the information from Who Gets the Bird, which is a newsletter on Substack.com by Jonah Furman, where he compiles this information for the whole of the U.S. labor movement. So if you want to see the rest of U.S. labor, you can find that at whogetsthebird.substack.com. In new organizing, the United Soccer League Players Association, the union of 900 minor league soccer players, has affiliated with the CWA. 404 Starbucks workers at 16 new stores filed for elections with Workers United in Richmond, including in Richmond, Virginia, and Asheville, North Carolina. 155 workers who make pipes and fire hydrants and similar things for Mueller Water Products in Kimball, Tennessee, are organizing with the steel workers. Around 138 film and TV post-production workers are organizing in about a dozen elections with CWA at Universal, Warner Brothers, Disney, Paramount, Apple Studios, HBO, CBS, and Netflix. 27 more workers at Diversified Gas and Oil in Charleston, West Virginia area are organizing with the steelworkers, joining 90 others on the other side of the state who filed last week. 110 detention transportation officers in Laredo, Texas are joining SPFPA, and 77 security guards at a federal building in Kentucky, who I think are currently with LEOSU, are being raided by SPFPA. In election wins and losses, we had 52 drivers for U.S. Foods in Charlotte, North Carolina. They voted to join the Teamsters Local 71, 35-13. 28 workers for Kinder Morgan in Chesapeake, Virginia, filed to decertify the steelworkers, which is notable as the oil and gas industry continues its crusade to de-unionize its workforce. In Bessemer, Alabama, the RWDSU likely lost again, but there are more challenged ballots than the margin by which the vote trails, which is to say, there's still technically a chance, and they did better than last time, which is impressive. In strikes and bargaining in Texas and Southern California, massive grocery strike threats continue to escalate, with at least 35,000 California groceries ready to walk at Kroger. Let's see. Oh, but there's an update from UFCW Local 135 out of town staff. Sorry about that. But yeah, 35,000 grocery workers in California are ready to strike, while in Texas, UFCW Local 455 is back on the brink of a strike, having backed off of a couple previous threats over the past 18 months as Kroger continues to go for the throat.
Any UFCW members here locally at Kroger stores, please reach out to us and talk to us.
Yep. If the Texas Krogers walk, that'll be another 17,000 grocery workers on strike. The UMWA strike at Warrior Met Metallurgical Coal in Brookwood, Alabama has passed the 1-year mark. The picket line saying is 1 day longer, 1 day stronger. In D.C., 175 cafeteria workers in the Senate organized with Unite Here Local 23. They won voluntary recognition from the contractor Restaurant Associates, but are still contending with low wages, high health care costs, and weak job security. In Montgomery, Alabama, staffers with the Southern Poverty Law Center, organized with the Washington-Baltimore News Guild, held a protest against the nonprofit's return-to-work policies, which disproportionately affected a unit staffed primarily by black women. That's great. On the federal level, 3 Democrats killed the confirmation of David Wheel to head the Wage and Hour Division of the Department of Labor. And Ray Curry, the head of the UAW, said he is running for re-election when the union holds its first ever membership-wide direct election. So, folks, that is it for our show today. Leave us a voicemail, buy our hats. You can find all of that at TVLR.fm. If you stay tuned for overtime, Mel Buer from the Morning Riot podcast is joining to talk about a union-busting white paper that compares union organizers to anti-U.S. Iraqi insurgents. Amazon bans freedom, Starbucks buses are crying, and more, so you don't want to miss it. All power to the workers. All right. Just wait a second.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you.
Bring me back.
Tell how the good.
All right. We got rid of those folks on the radio. So howdy. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for staying with us. We've got a great overtime lined up for you. You can still call in. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. Really excited for overtime, though. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be talking to Mel Buer at the top. So stay tuned for that. We're going to take a break and be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party age player. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party age player. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? 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 I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio show. We are now in overtime, and we've got some good stuff. Mel Buer is joining from Morning Riot podcast. Amazon is banning freedom. The NLRB moves to ban captive audience meetings. We talk about the slap and more. So let's go ahead and get started. So Mel Buer is an adjunct English professor. She is writing a book on radical media for OR Books. She is the host of Morning Riot. Mel, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Let's try that again. Sorry about that. Mel, you were muted on my end, but you should be good to go now.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah. Great. Glad to have you. So, I met you when you helped Max with that Kellogg's fundraising stream a couple months ago. How much did y'all end up raising again? Wasn't it like 15?
I think it was, close to $18,000. I think something like
awesome.
that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really great. How did you get mixed up with a character like Max? I mean, that's like, yeesh.
Twitter, actually. I was podcasting. I started podcasting in like 2019 with Pearson Bolt of Coffee with Comrades. And I ended up getting a Twitter because I wanted to be sort of available to listeners if they had questions or concerns or they were angry with what I said on my podcast. And over the course of that year, I just met a lot of interesting ostensibly leftist podcasters. And so Max and I ended up in a group DM for some election podcasts that we did in early 2020. And that's kind of how we got mixed up together. Great guy. Love working with him.
Absolutely. Really, really great guy. Couldn't ask for a better fella to, cover worker struggles.
Truly.
His Working People podcast, really great. He's doing really great work as the editor-in-chief over at The Real News. And you've been writing some articles for them, right?
I have, yeah. Most recent one was a unfortunately unsuccessful union drive that happened at Sabre Industries in Sioux City. It's a manufacturing company. It's a plant out in Sioux City that makes steel structures for the telecommunications industry. And one of their workers sent me a DM like last October after the Kellogg strike kicked off, saying that they had walked off the job. And they reached out to the IBEW and were trying to bring a union into the plant. This is like the third time that they've tried to do it. And this is the closest they got. They actually got a union election through the NLRB. And unfortunately, the union avoidance, air quotes there, the union busting company that the Sabre Industries brought in was successful in trying to turn people away from a union vote. But they got close. Hopefully next time they actually win it,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, hope so. So what about your podcast? What kind of stuff there are so many podcasts that I have, yours has like been on my list, but I haven't actually been able to like check it out. What kind of stuff do you talk about on Morning Riot?
All sorts of things. Really, Morning Riot is meant to be kind of a free-flowing conversation with activists, labor historians. Our next season, we're planning on doing more of a sort of history type of season about the Haymarket affair. But usually it's just conversations with folks. And recent episodes, we've talked about the labor movement. We've talked about leftist or radical media. We've talked about all sorts of interesting things. The podcast is only got a couple of episodes in its first season. I am in the midst of writing a book, so it's kind of a little bit lower on my priority list. And I'm deep in this book writing, so we probably won't see a second season for another couple of months.
Gotcha. What about the book? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the book is tentatively titled F Your Newsroom. I don't know if I can swear on this podcast, so
you can now.
Oh, yeah, we're off the radio.
Only now.
Yeah, we're now
great.
we're in overtime, so we're off the radio, and the FCC censors can't do anything to us. So.
Just the YouTube censors.
The book is called Fuck Your Newsroom. And it's a book about radical media and particularly radical independent anti-capitalist media. I don't know if you have these conversations with leftists or radical folks who are in media. Everyone's constantly talking about how we need robust independent media to counter the sort of mainstream media narrative that happens in this country. My argument is that we kind of have it. There are a lot of folks who are putting in a lot of work to kind of build that sort of alternative. And many of them are anarchists, they're anti-capitalists, they're socialists, and we all have sort of tapped into this long-standing legacy of I don't even want to call it countercultural because I don't think it is. Just radical media in this country. It's been a part of organizing and politics in this country for as long as this country has had any sort of media wing. The political origins of this media infrastructure date back well before we even were a country. So, the book is meant to be sort of a study, or it's not going to be all encompassing because that would take too long. Take years and years of really kind of reaching out to everyone. But what I really want to do is draw attention to the fact that there are folks who are working together and separate from each other to kind of build up that alternative media ecosystem. And I really want to draw attention to the fact that the potential to continue to build more independent anti-capitalist media is there. All we have to do is talk to each other. So
I think that is fantastic. And I hope just having you on the show today is one little step in that direction, because as Jacob mentioned, there are so many podcasts out now that are like right up our alley or that have something important to say. In addition to, of course, Real News Network, More Perfect Union, Labor Notes, and In These Times, magazines and websites and video series. There is a pretty robust media system out there for folks of our persuasion. And I think that's fantastic. The more we can all collaborate, and if we're all pulling in the same direction, we can just do so much more. And so thankful that you are doing that work and you're here to share it with us.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to your book, and hopefully we'll be able to get you on to talk more about it once it's out.
That'd be awesome.
But that's not why I brought you on today. The reason that I brought you on was to have a good laugh. You uncovered the Labor Relations Institute, their white paper, Left of Boom, Best Practices for Proactive Companies in a Changing Labor Environment. The Labor Relations Institute is actually the union-busting firm that Hershey's contracted in their Stewart's Draft, Virginia anti-union campaign. So, Mel, can you tell folks what is so interesting about this paper?
So the Labor Relations Institute is also the union busting firm that was brought in to Sabre Industries. They have also, I think, more famously, if you know what's been going on with the Collectivo Coffee Roasters union drive, the NLRB got involved because Labor Relations Institute, I think, was found to be doing some nefarious shit. Really. And I think there was a formal complaint actually filed against them for some of the shit they were doing with the Collectivo Coffee Roasters, who I believe were successful in their union drive despite this. But if you look at the Labor Relations Institute website, all it is, the whole company essentially is meant to avoid unions in the workplace. That is what they make their money on. And they've been in business for, they claim, for 40 years, they claim to have won 10,000 plus elections, which means there are no unions at those workplaces, 250,000 plus direct relationships preserved, right? And they have a series of white papers on their website that are publicly available. And one of them is filed under this folder that says, "What can your business learn from the Iraq War?" Which, God, it's absurd. It's absurd, right? And Left of Boom is this white paper that was written in 2010 by Philip Wilson, the president and general counsel of LRI. And the whole idea is that it uses this very heavy-handed sort of comparison of union organizers being Iraqi insurgents dropping an IED in the workplace.
Wow.
Yeah, it's... There's a lot here. I don't recommend reading it if you like to keep your blood pressure below a certain level, because it's, to be quite frank, like, it's absurd, but also it's a little unsettling, the ways in which they view workplace organizers, especially, far beyond just the idea of, okay, so we're not terrorist insurgents in the workplace. You know what I mean? That's yikes,
Because we all know how those are treated by the American empire. So yeah, it is, as funny as it is a little scary that, we would even be tagged with that label.
Well, it's really illuminating to kind of see how managers, bosses, company owners, and the folks at these union avoidance firms view workplace organizers, whether you're a worker organizer or, you are a paid staff at a business union coming into a workplace, all of these things, they're like, yeah, you are part of this sort of insurgency, and individuals who want to, quote unquote, preserve the direct management relationship, i.e. not have a union in your workplace, you are members of the military that are tasked with rooting out these bomb makers and making sure that these bombs don't go off in the workplace. It's very freaky language, right? Yeah. And if you read this white paper, it's so annoying. It just makes me want to punch someone.
I have to say, like, the class consciousness among the ruling class, again and really again, is demonstrated. Like, I think we can all look at issues in terms of working class consciousness and our ability to conceive of ourselves as a class collectively. But the bosses, they don't have that problem. They are very conscious and seem to be pretty explicit in how they view us.
This is class warfare. Literally, they're using a war metaphor to talk about workplace organizing and combating workplace organizing. They understand as much as we should understand that this is class warfare from the top down, and the white paper itself has, it's very illuminating to see how they would step into potential workplace organizing campaigns and try and figure out ways to disrupt it, Perhaps this is good information for anyone who would like to see how a boss fight would go down in the workplace, However, there are some parts of this that just make me laugh. Like on the first page, what is this page? Yeah, the first page, there's this footnote. The obligatory, I would like to thank so-and-so, thank our troops who are in the Middle East, which is, I think, hilarious. This paper is dedicated to the thousands of men and women around the world who put their lives at risk for their country every single day. Like there's like an obligatory thank the troops footnote in this white paper, which is hilarious to me. It's also hilarious that the vast majority of the research done for this white paper came from a series of Washington Post articles and conversations with family members who are in the military, apparently. Yeah.
So how much of the paper is like, if most of it is done from talking to the families of military members, like how,
and skimming Washington Post articles.
I mean, how do they connect that to, like, what is actually the connection between anti-U.S. Iraqi insurgents and union organizers?
There's a military strategy that he talks about. The military created the Joint Improvised Explosive Device Defeat Organization, which is apparently an organization that spends all of its time rooting out potential instances where a military convoy could hit an IED. So essentially what they're doing is not only are they trying to avoid these situations from happening in the first place, like making sure that these folks aren't, getting blown up on their way to a different city in Iraq. They're trying to find the bomb maker. They're trying to find the parts that make the bomb. They're trying to be proactive in the way that they do this type of research and working. And so what he's doing is he's kind of drawing this into, this is Philip Wilson, the Labor Relations Institute CEO. What he's doing is he's trying to draw a comparison to how you can find the quote unquote bomb maker before you get to the point where a bomb goes off in the workplace. And he calls it left of boom or right of boom. And the techniques that we are most familiar with in the workplace in terms of union avoidance coming in would be called right of boom in this white paper. So we're talking about captive audience meetings. We're talking about showing a video about union cards, pointing people to websites that quote unquote educate employees about unions, right? All of the anti-union propaganda that ends up in the workplace as a union drive is happening. He calls the firewall defense the right of boom strategy, right? The left of boom strategy means that we want to make sure that the workplace is structured in such a way that there is no moment where workers feel like they have a space to organize. And it's very weird strategies that he talks about. The biggest one is essentially creating a culture in the workplace where managers have the ability to essentially surveil their employees and stop anyone from potentially organizing their workplace in the first place. And he does this whole thing where it's like, make sure the workplace is a great place to work so that there is no like grading event that would cause a union drive to kick off, because oftentimes that's what happens. You have a grievance, the grievance isn't addressed properly, whether it's because the management is assholes or, a pay raise is disproportionate for what's going on or whatever. They talk about how like you want to make sure that your workplace is full of employees that are satisfied. But if you read between the lines, what they're doing actually is creating a culture where individuals who are perhaps charismatic talk to their worker, their fellow workers very often, create these spaces where they could potentially be a worker organizer in a campaign in the future. They don't have the chance to get a foothold amongst the rest of the employees, essentially. So you're training management to see chinks in the armor, essentially, right? To make sure that these union drives or organizing drives don't happen. You look for them constantly. And what that looks like is surveilling your employees, creating a company culture where employees can surveil each other and report back to management about potential union activity that's happening. You're essentially just trying to create this culture where no one trusts each other. There is no solidarity built, and that has a, direct benefit to management and bosses who don't want union activity happening in their workplace. So it's not about improving working conditions,
right?
Right. It's not about good pay for the sake of it because workers deserve it. They're entitled to it. It's not about good workplace conditions where these things are a part of the culture because it benefits the worker. It's so that there's no, none of those things happen in the workplace, according to this white paper, right? It's very insidious, right? We could talk shit on this because it's fucking absurd. You know what I mean? But at the same time, like what's happening, in these conversations is that you are essentially surveilling your employees to make sure that there is no union activity that happens. And that is like insidious shit that's going on here,
Yeah. So what are the creating a culture where solidarity is difficult to build? Like what does that, what is the advice basically that this union busting firm gives the bosses who in this case are, U.S. military members to find, the jihadi insurgents, which is presumably union organizers. Like, what is the advice to actually implement that a culture where solidarity is difficult to build? Like, what are the and where you might snitch on your coworker for like talking about freedom or something?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different things that they have, like 5 different strategies that they outline as being left of boom strategies. So the biggest ones that I took away from, you create this culture where employee engagement is based on sort of building what they call a promoter sort of culture. So you create a culture where your employees are active promoters of your organization, and where you are stressing projects and engagements that increase the number of employees who are promoters. So instead of people talking shit about their job, you create a culture where they don't talk shit about their job, essentially, so that they can bring in more individuals who are interested about that. There's also employee survey research, which I consider to be surveilling your employees. And what you're doing is you are identifying what they call key nodes in the informal communication network. So this is where the surveillance happens, right? So it's a structured interview process where you're identifying key influencers among employees, not only people who would potentially begin to agitate for workplace organizing, but also people who would be able to do the sort of counterinsurgency that you want to do in a workplace. And you influence those individuals to make sure that they are promoting the positive company culture, right? These are also the same sort of people who would then become folks who could snitch on your coworkers, essentially, if that shit were happening, The other strategy is like positive employee relations training for supervisors. They have this trademarked training called tripwire training. It's trademarked. They've trademarked the phrase tripwire training, which apparently is designed to teach supervisors and managers how to recognize behavior change in the workplace before it spirals out of control into a boom event. So essentially, this guy has like ran with this metaphor to its like logical end. You know what I mean? Like this has been the thing that they've been trafficking in for at least the last 10 years. They have a whole ass training program for management that's all based in this sort of like, make sure the bomb doesn't go off in the workplace. I think he's probably so proud of this shit. He probably is so chuffed about it. Fucking ridiculous. But it's hilarious because it's like active interval training is designed to teach supervisors how not to be a jerk, not because they should be good people, but because we don't need worker organizers using that as a way to organize a fucking union campaign.
One of the things I see in here that's repeated over and over is about direct relationship. And that's where we've talked frequently on this show about the union busting campaigns and the way they love to third party unions. And in some cases, unions do things that make that more effective because they function more like third parties. But that is such a huge part of, I know, Amazon and Starbucks right now, but it's really pervasive. And you see, I just see this quote: "It's critically important that the direct relationship message be repeated regularly and in multiple channels." And it goes on and on about how basically the employee should be bombarded nonstop from the moment they are hired with this idea of direct relationship. And they even mention, basically you shouldn't necessarily throw in unions as part of that conversation. We don't want to get an unfair labor practice charge. Just keep it as direct relationship. And the thing that immediately, brings to mind is if I have a direct relationship with somebody, they don't have to remind me every day. At some point, I'm married. My wife and I have a direct relationship. We can talk about anything. And yeah, we'll still remind each other, like, hey, you can come talk to me about whatever. But it's something we know because it's true. And that's the funny thing about it is you're trying to convince people of things that are not so. Any worker who has an issue on the job knows they don't have a direct relationship with anybody in power, because you go to your boss and they're probably going to redirect you to HR. You go to HR, they're going to redirect you back to your boss. And you just get stuck in this, cycle. And that's assuming they just don't offhand dismiss you or retaliate against you from the jump, which is often what's going to happen. And so, it's just, it is pretty insidious. And what you mentioned earlier about the identifying people, like key people, in a lot of ways, they follow the union organizer playbook of mapping the workplace and identifying, your strong supporters, your leaders, your in-betweens. They do a lot of the same thing from the opposite vantage point.
Well, and you have to also remember that a lot of these independent consultants that LRI contracts in these workplaces are former union members. Like the independent consultant that was brought in for Sabre Industries, who conducted an incredible amount of captive audience meetings across 3 shifts every week for 2 months, 3 months while this union drive was happening. He uses that as I listen to these captive audience meeting recordings. I have a couple of hours of them, which I, again, don't recommend listening to if you like your blood pressure to stay at a certain level. You know what I mean? These workers had the patience of saints, because I would have just stood up and slapped the shit out of this man. He's like, I'm a former Teamster, I was in a union, and that's a huge part of it, where they're like, I worked with this union and I found that the union wasn't worth it for me, and then they got into private consulting because companies will pay you really good money to do that shit, to be essentially a class trader. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
We brought that up earlier on the show. I actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. We talked about folks who flip from union office or union staff and end up in management, or end up at the HR, department across the table from you.
I mean, there's just so much cachet there. This isn't just union management, union buster, but you have a certain level of cachet as somebody who has changed, right? So that's how Dave Rubin got to be, a big celebrity on the right, is because he was like, I'm a gay lefty, but man, the lefties are super crazy. That's how, that's there's a certain amount of cachet that you get for switching sides. And it's all the more, I think it's even more effective when, union members or union organizers, become class traders and go to the dark side and try to help the boss steal money from workers.
But you get a certain sense of authority, especially if you're walking into a workplace where only a small section of people actually understand how unions work.
Right.
Yeah, it's an uphill battle.
I've never been in a union. I don't know anything. And here's this person who was he was a union organizer.
Here's
for
this
20
person
years.
who is walking a razor thin line, because what he says in these meetings could, if he says the wrong thing, is going to be considered, stepping across the NLRA's line, which is, they don't want it to be illegal. So they say, we're here to educate you. We're here to talk about the facts about unions, right? And it's manipulative language. So, and when people push back in these meetings, I was listening to these captive audience recordings, there are, worker organizers who are saying, this doesn't make sense, because what you're talking about is, you're saying this third party is coming in and they're not going to have your best interests. You don't have a say. And, these workers are like, what do you mean? The union is us. This is us. We are the ones who are doing these negotiations. What are you talking about? And these union busting consultants are saying, well, I'm just here to tell you, this is all, these are just the facts about unions. This is what's going to happen. And when you have these happen every week, they take out, an hour and a half of your shift every week to talk about the same shit over and over and over. Eventually, you either get scared because they go straight for scare tactics every time, or you get tired and you say, all right, fine, I'll vote no. Can I go back to work now? They just wear these folks down. And that's what happened at Sabre. They had enough of these meetings. They talked to enough of these people who were just, who walked off the job because of bad pay. Management gave everyone raises right after it because people walked off the job and shut down the plant for a weekend. You know what I mean? And then they spent 3 months, 4 months, 5 months just saying, no, we'll do it. It'll be fine. We'll work on this. We'll work on this. And eventually the union election failed, which is unfortunate because, talking to those workers, like they tried to bring a union to that plant specifically 3 times now. Third time. In the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, one of the worker organizers who I talked to, when he came into the company, they were in the midst of a union drive. So apparently conditions have not changed at all, to the point where they're doing this multiple times, and like the same company gets brought in every time because they've had success keeping a union out of that plant for however many years they've been trying to do it, and it's manipulative and it's just,
obviously it has some effect or they wouldn't continue to do it. We've seen how it can be defeated at Starbucks and at Amazon most recently, but it's just like TV commercials. At some point they seep into your brain, or they wouldn't spend the billions that they do on advertising. It may not work every time. It may not work on every person, but they just throw it all against the wall to see what will stick. And it is,
they just need it to work on enough people.
Right. Just enough to distract or to demoralize. It's pretty disturbing from the sense of the power dynamics at play, because this isn't like, a meeting at church and you can get up and walk out if you want to. This is work. Your livelihood is at stake, and the way you respond to these meetings, the way you behave yourself in these meetings, and what you may say, or if you raise your hand and ask questions, all these things could really impact your ability to eat and have a house and feed your family and go to the doctor, and that's what makes them so insidious. As silly as some of the stuff is that they say, and some of it is like so obvious bullshit. But some of it has enough truth embedded in it, where it can manipulate people, and like you said, a lot of it is just beating people down and demoralizing them to the point of, being sick of the whole thing. Don't even want to hey, I don't even want to hear about anything involving this anymore because I've been bombarded for so long, for so much, and it should not be legal. And Jacob, I know we're going to talk about the NLRB, news later in the show, and hopefully it will be outlawed because it sucks.
Yeah. So I really hope that is something
does the
that
paper ever
moves
actually
forward.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I said I really hope that they do actually make it like illegal for these meetings to happen. Because God,
so
your
does
question
the paper
though, sorry.
ever make explicit the comparison, like how do they actually say like, okay, this is the same as blowing off a U.S. serviceman's arm or leg or something like what they do?
Yes. Here's this quote: because these boom events are so important to a company, it is useful to think about them the same way that the military thinks about the IED attacks in Iraq. Union organizers are in many ways comparable to the insurgent networks that attempt to disrupt the U.S. military in Iraq. That is in the white paper. And then they go on to talk about how union organizers describe their goal is to disrupt and create fear and a division between employees and their employer. So essentially they're talking, it's apples to apples for this guy, right?
That's some projection there on that last bit.
Yeah.
I've never heard a union organizer straight up say, yeah, we're here to cause chaos and fear and division.
But again, this white paper is trying to sell this service to companies, right? So, because the last 2 pages of the white paper is like, now that you know just a little tidbit, would you like to buy our full service? Yeah, here's all that we offer. Talk to us. We'll do a free consulting call, and then we'll come into your workplace. And I've seen like the LM20s, the LRI is like sent off to folks for their services. We're talking like minimum $400 to $500 per hour, plus travel, plus per diem food and everything else, for each of the consultants that they bring in. The consultants, the private contractors that they bring in for these types of work, they get paid something like $200 an hour. So LRI is just making money hand over fist, just contracting independent contractors to bring them into workplaces. So, these independent contractors could probably benefit from a union. I don't know. Because they're also getting shafted, truly. And this is what they do. They can boast 10,000 plus workplaces, avoided unions, because they are handing out shit like this and charging thousands of dollars per day over the course of 6 weeks to 6 months. That's wild. That's wild money. And if the big thing that bothers me, well, maybe this is just kind of hilarious, I suppose, but these companies spend so much money on these union avoidance firms, like way more money than, say, a raise for their workforce over the course of a year. Millions of dollars with Amazon. Seriously? Why? Because you didn't want to give up power in the workplace? What? It would have cost you less. It cost Kellogg's millions of dollars to keep people out on strike for 2 months, when the folks on strike were like, you could have paid for our raises like 5 times over at this point,
Oh yeah. I mean,
why?
Warrior Met, they, if they wouldn't have, they've lost hundreds of millions of dollars, but they're still willing, their goal is to bust the union. And so they're willing to forego a lot of money to, have that power.
It's wild to me, we're not asking for much in many of these situations, just asking to be treated like we have a shred of dignity and humanity left, and these companies don't care. And especially at places like Sabre, where it's run by, bought by private equity, and it's all about moving money and numbers in the right direction. The folks who make that money are the ones who are just an afterthought or a footnote, and when you read white papers like this, so absurd, you just know that like every other union busting company that comes into a workplace has probably got something very similar, some proprietary, these are insurgents, we are here to crush the insurgency in a workplace. You start to really think about like, okay, this really is class warfare. We are up against individuals who do not view us as equals in the workplace. We are terrorists in the workplace. Like what, Oh, yeah. And at that point, it's like, fine, you want us to be that way? We will drop a bomb in the workplace and we will organize the fuck out of it, because
absolutely,
clearly you don't give a shit.
Yeah, that's the, to the extent that union organizers do sow fear and chaos, all it is illuminating the division that is already there. Like illuminating the power dynamics and the hierarchies and the lack of control that you have. There is a part of the way that you're, encouraged to have organizing conversations that is agitation. But agitation is not lying to people. Agitation is not creating chaos. It's not making situations out of whole cloth. It is pulling out from the worker that you're talking to their lived experience, pulling out for them, helping put in stark relief what is actually happening to them, and like help them understand why it's fucking bullshit.
Right. Well, and also, it's not a foregone conclusion that these conditions can't improve.
Right.
Which is a huge thing. It's trying to empower your coworkers to say, yeah, you're right, this is kind of fucked up. What if we tried to change it? Right. That conversation absolutely feels like, a bomb being dropped in the workplace, because you're shredding the veil that this, management or company culture that apparently is, very much strategic in the way that they construct it. Right. You're ripping that shit to shreds, and you're saying, hey, it doesn't have to be this way. Yeah. Right. Let's do something to change that.
And that's so threatening to those in power. The idea of what if it was different, and what if we could make it different by coming together, is such a threat that they would go to these measures. And it's, it's sad, but one of the things you made me remember is one of the most common things that you hear in these union busting videos and captive audience meetings is how, well, your contract, things could actually get worse. Your pay could actually go down. It might go up, but it could go down. It's like, motherfucker, it's only going down if you're asking for it to go down.
Right.
I mean, the union's not going to ask for it to go down.
Yeah.
They're not going to ask for worse benefits. So if this contract, not that this happens very often, if ever, but if by some chance you unionize and your contract gives you worse pay or worse working conditions or worse benefits than you've already had, well, that's on the company. Maybe it's on, maybe you could have had a better negotiating team, or maybe you could have had a more engaged membership, or
right. They're certainly not asking for less.
Right. Yeah. Clearly.
Right.
So, I mean, and it's weird how they will sort of remove their own agency from this process. Like, this is just the natural order of things.
It's like an abusive relationship. You made me do this, right? It's your
Yeah.
fault, right? You hear that in organizing campaigns in academia all the time when grade strikes happen or things of that nature. It's like, you are disadvantaging your students, right? Who don't have a dog in this fight. It's your fault that your students aren't progressing forward because you're withholding grades, which is the only way to withhold work in academia. It's like, no, man, you're the one who, is doing this, right? Folks who lose their appointments and such, it's your fault because you went on strike. It's like, no, you're the one who's the arbiter of this, right? You're the one who makes this decision. It's not us, right? It's not the things that we do. We are just trying to find some space to be able to, improve our lives, because you are banking on the fact that we view our careers, our jobs as a vocation that we should put in free work for, and it's like, no, like, we don't want to be exploited in that way. No one wants to be exploited in that way. Job is a job. I should get paid for it, period. So.
Yeah. Mel, thanks for taking the time to join us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, we enjoyed it. Thanks again for having it, or for
coming on.
being willing to come on and share, and best of luck with your book.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'll let you know when
Where
it
can
comes
people
out
find
next
you?
year. You can find me mostly on Twitter at Cold Brewed Tool. It's a mouthful. I know. I don't know why I picked this handle a couple of years ago, but you can also find the podcast on Twitter at Morning Riot Pod. Those are going to be the best ways to reach me. There's a link tree in my personal Twitter account if you want to go to my Patreon or website or what have you. You can also find me at the Real News Network. I have a couple of articles there, many more to come, I'm sure, if I can get Max to keep accepting my pitches. Best way to reach me is there. My DMs are open. So if you hated what I said or you want to give me a compliment, feel free to send me a DM. So.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Mel. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right. Yeah, we've been talking to Mel Buer. She is the host of Morning Riot podcast. You can find her on Twitter at Cold Brewed Tool. So let's go ahead and jump to down to Brookwood. Down in Brookwood, there was a rally last week that had thousands of folks from all over the country, retired mine workers, other union members, flight attendants, federal workers, teachers, iron workers, transport workers, all sorts of folks came from across the country. It was like 3,000 people. It was a lot of folks to show their support for the striking miners in Brookwood, Alabama, who are striking against Warrior Met. They have been on strike for a year now. They've been on strike for over a year, and they've been fighting all alone, basically, with the help of working folks in Alabama and across the country, but without any real help from the political class, from media in Alabama, conservative or otherwise. You'd be forgiven for not hearing about it if you mainly get your news from conservative talk radio, because they were too busy covering the important stuff, like the fact that Jefferson County schools are no longer going to be bombarding random ball game goers with state-sanctioned prayer. So that's what they were concerned with last week on conservative talk radio in Alabama. That was the big story, is that Jefferson County schools no longer going to be doing prayers at ball games over the PA.
But they still will in plenty of other places in Alabama, let me assure you of that. If you haven't been to a Friday night football game in a while, especially in your county school systems or some of your more rural school systems, yeah, it absolutely happens. Now, I was told that such things no longer exist, and that's why America's going down the shitter, is because we don't have prayer in schools. But it's funny how anytime I'm around schools, doesn't seem to be the case. But regardless, I mean, you've got a rally with thousands of people from across the nation right here in Alabama, in Brookwood, and it's commemorating a strike that's been on for over a year that is now possibly one of, if not the longest strike in Alabama history.
It is the longest now in Alabama history.
So, and David, I see your comment. Hope you have a great weekend, man. Thanks again for tuning in and for all your support. Same to Jeb and everybody else who's been tuning in today and chatting in. Definitely enjoy the back and forth and the dialogue. That is one of the cool things about doing it live.
Yes.
But I was not able to go to the rally on Wednesday. I was at work with my IATSE brothers and sisters putting together Disney on Ice. But Jacob, I know I saw where you went, David went. I think maybe Jeb mentioned in the chat he went. There was
his local donated $2,500 to their strike fund.
Right.
Very
so
cool.
Shout out to the Ironworkers for doing that. That's really great. I know there's still a lot of need to support the strike pantry and to support the strike fund. And if you haven't donated in a while, or if you've never donated, please, whatever you can. I don't have much to give, but I try to give pretty regular as I can. I know there was a fundraiser about a month or so ago, right after the one you did, and Lee Baines put out some music to go with it. There's just been a really cool community of folks to come out of the woodwork to try to support them. Not any of the established figures, as you mentioned, not... Right. Right-wing media and the politicians and those folks have been mostly silent, but there have been a lot of people, good people, here in Alabama and across the country and across the world even to step up and show their solidarity for these brothers and sisters. And
the UFCW has donated $400,000 to their strike fund.
Wow, that is amazing. That's a testament to the solidarity that we have the potential to exercise.
Absolutely. And their strike fund has raised $2 million over the last year in total. And they have paid out from their union about $20 million in strike benefits and health care for the 1,000 striking miners down there.
That's very impressive. That's keeping people fed and housed right now. And we can't let Warrior Met and BlackRock and these other hedge funds, we can't let them destroy this union in our backyard. Yeah. We just, and that's clearly, as you mentioned, that's the goal here. They're trying to starve out these miners, and they're trying to destroy the union to take away this voice that they have. And so it's up to all of us to pitch in where we can and support them where we can so that they can stay strong and hopefully see a victory soon. I really was hoping by now we would have good news to report. But the company is dug in, and it's not going to move unless it feels it has to.
Yeah, I was talking to I believe it was Hayden that told me this last week. She said that, as some of them were walking out, some of the managers were like, we're not ever going to let y'all back. There's definitely, there is an obstinance from the company that is evil. It
is.
And the fact that there are people who portray themselves as advocates and working class and coal miners heroes that have yet to say anything about this speaks volumes. And it's frustrating, but it is amazing seeing them hold out this long. There's one local that Hayden said last week that they still haven't had a single person cross the picket line.
Wow.
Which is amazing after a year on strike, not to have one scab from that local.
And just as a reminder, folks, they are advertising all across the country to bring in these scabs. They're looking for them. They're bringing in people from out of state. And of course, there's some local folks as well, unfortunately. But it's a very important struggle, and I'm very proud. This is what makes me proud about Alabama. There's a lot of shit about our state that makes me disturbed. That it can be demoralizing at times, but this is the kind of Alabama that we can be proud of. These 1,100 folks out there on strike, and the folks who have come to their side and who've chipped in money, who've given it attention, who've contributed however they can. That's the kind of Alabama that we deserve.
Absolutely, yeah. It's amazing seeing what they've been able to do. And, there have been actually reports that there have been some movement, but there's still not enough to actually, warrant ratifying a contract over, which is unfortunate. This is certainly a situation where if a year ago they had just given them what they had in 2015, both parties would be significantly better off as far financially.
Yeah.
Financially. But that's not all the company cares. The company wants to retain their power. There were some education bills that passed the legislature and have headed to the governor's mansion for signature. One of them included a significant pay raise for teachers. Adam, can you talk to us about some of the education updates in Alabama?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that, since we do have, I would say, some degree of good news. I know it's easy for us to be Debbie Downers about Alabama politics because, frankly, there's not a lot good that comes out of Alabama politics, but in good news, there is a record education trust fund budget, and my understanding is it's about a 7% increase overall to last year's budget, which is definitely a step in the right direction. Now, you put that in context that my understanding is inflation's at about 8% year over year. So, I know what the headlines are saying, and I know what the education groups are going to be saying to their members, and I get that, but this is not a time to just pop champagne and blow up balloons and rest assured that everything's been fixed, because it's far from that. It's a huge investment in Alabama public schools, and I think that's, like I said, a step in the right direction. There's going to be some important resources that are added, including mental health coordinators. They're actually going to fund the technology coordinator positions for every district, which, especially now in 2022, very important that school districts actually have the staff to deal with technology and distance learning and integrate technology into their schools. There's going to be an increase in pre-K funding, which is absolutely needed. If you're not aware, Alabama has what's called first class pre-K program, and it actually is first class. It's nationally recognized as a very effective preschool program. The kids who go to it do very well, and there's some evidence that those benefits actually persist throughout their education. Now it starts to fade away as socioeconomic obstacles get in the way. But a kid who's gone through an Alabama first-class pre-K program is going to be in a much better position for kindergarten and first grade than a kid who hasn't. So that's good news. More money. I think about 20-something million is being infused to pre-K. But my understanding is that raises the number of the access from about 42% to 45% of Alabama's eligible children. Now, they didn't have no fancy numeracy act when I was in school, but I can do the math and realize that 45% ain't 100%. And if we're serious about improving education in the state, 100% of children should be able to go to a high-quality pre-K program at no cost. That should be just a baseline demand coming from all of us involved in education. And so I think, and I remember having a discussion with Representative Anthony Daniels about this a few years ago, and he is a big pre-K advocate. We have some pretty significant disagreements, I would say, but I like Anthony on a personal level, and I agree with him about the importance of pre-K, and he felt like the education community was not going hard enough on pre-K, in part because if the Republicans are going to constantly bash you over test scores and constantly try to hold you accountable for these test scores, which we know mostly reflect poverty and other socioeconomic issues, but if that's the game we're playing, we know that investing in pre-K can help us play this game more or less. It shouldn't be a game. This is families' lives. This is the future of children. But Republicans and Democrats, to some degree, love to play games when it comes to children and education. So I'm getting sidetracked there. But taking it back to good news, teacher raises. Every teacher, every school employee, period, is going to see at least a 4% pay raise. That's good. We'd like to see it better, but hey, that's a step in the right direction. One area where a lot of progress was made was in revising the state salary matrix. So teachers, counselors, librarians, they're all kind of classified the same as far as pay is concerned. And there's a state minimum salary matrix. Every school district in the state has to pay at least that. They can pay more. Some do, some don't. But what they did is actually revise a lot of the steps in there so that every year folks will be seeing pay raises, because as it exists now, you may move a step in your experience, but you're actually only seeing a step raise every 3 years. And now it has been revised to where folks will actually see a cost of living increase on an annual basis as they move up in experience. They added some steps at the back end because what we've seen, particularly post-COVID, is a flurry of resignations and more accurately retirements. So teachers who have their years in the retirement system are getting the hell out of here. And the goal is to try to retain those folks. We need to recruit new educators, but you know what? We've got folks in the buildings now that we want to hold on to. And so I hope that this is going to be a step in the right direction. In talking with some educators about this recently, one of the things that we all discussed is that as great as it is to see these pay raises and as necessary and overdue as they are, pay doesn't fix everything. Pay does not alone address working conditions. And so there's still a lot of work to be done on that front. And so that's I'm trying to kind of be nuanced here in that, yes, we have some good news and we need to appreciate that. And I am appreciative of everyone involved, from the legislators down to the lobbyists and the educators themselves advocating for themselves. This build on that and move forward from this new foundation of more investment. Because the context is that we had the second highest cuts to public education in Alabama after the Great Recession. We had increases in healthcare costs for education employees. We had increases in retirement contributions for education employees, the creation of a Tier 2 retirement system with weaker benefits, and on and on and on. So in a lot of ways, what we're doing is making up for lost ground over the past 10, 15 years. So, don't celebrate just yet as if this is mission accomplished. These are good investments to build off of. I know there was some discussion of divisive concepts and, critical race theory bans. My understanding is the divisive concepts bill did not pass, so that's good. It will come back. The right wing has found a, hot button issue that their base really rallies to and responds to. And so rest assured, legislators... Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and especially in the next year, in the first year of the quadrennium, we can expect to see I feel pretty comfortable predicting that we can expect to see a lot of these more controversial bills that were not able to pass this year, a big fight over them in the first year of the quadrennium, because that is when they are the least responsive. That's when they passed the gas tax, right? Wasn't it? It was the first or the second year of the quadrennium. Would they pass a gas tax this year? Hell no. Hell no, they're not going to pass a gas tax this year, but it's been, 3 or 4 years ago. And so it's a lot easier to, for people to forget about it. And so... I'm
glad you mentioned that, because it's true. The last year of the quadrennium, the election year, they're all hustling to get out of the session so they can go back to campaigning. So some of the more controversial bills, some of which we covered in depth on this show, thankfully were delayed enough by activists and were, just dragged out in the process to where they didn't make it through the finish line. Thank God for some of these bills. But all this bad shit will be coming back next year. And next year it may be the one where we have to be even more careful for those reasons you outlined. So I expect to see the school choice come back, with a vengeance. The big school choice bill by Del Marsh didn't make it through. But again, folks, we already have school voucher programs through the Alabama Accountability Act, which is both a private school voucher program and a tax cut program for the wealthy. So these things are building on a context that was already weak for public education. And so while we're moving forward in many areas, there's a lot of work to be done, and the goal should be bottom up decision making, power to the educators who do the job, who do the work day in and day out, who know their students, who know the families and communities. They are the experts, not legislators in Montgomery, not bureaucrats sitting at the State Department of Education. And there are some good people there, don't get me wrong, but those folks don't have all the answers. Right. It's going to be, how can educators organize and come together collectively to, yes, build on the pay raises, build on benefit improvements, but start to address some key issues of working conditions, and start to address the lack of input that they have into our education system, so that we can build a public school system that is truly more public and democratic. I think those are really the missions that we have moving forward. And the last thing I'll say on education is, I know there's a lot of talk on right-wing radio in Yellowhammer News and those kind of places about the Literacy Act. The Literacy Act delay was sent to the governor, and the whole reason behind that, the Literacy Act was a pretty extensive legislation a couple years ago about literacy, as the name implies, and there were some good things in the bill, like hiring more reading coaches and investing resources in teaching literacy. There were also some things that were dubious, I would say, at best, one of which is the third grade retention component, which says essentially if little Johnny or little Jane doesn't pass the test and doesn't, prove themselves to be proficient in literacy according to our definitions, they would be held back and have to repeat the third grade. Some other states have this, some don't. the true academic research behind this practice, I would say, is a mixed bag at best. But that has been delayed. I know AEA got a lot of flack for pushing for that delay, but y'all, it's just common sense. If you talk to teachers, the 2019-2020 school year, well, that got jacked up starting in March. Folks were sent home. Then you look at the 2020-2021 school year, last school year. Again, there was tons of disruptions. Vaccines weren't even available until the second semester. There was outbreaks in district after district. There were some that were trying to do remote. Some were coming back and then having to send them home again. All that to say, the last few years would not really be a decent baseline to start this punitive approach of the retention.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal would be, let's have a couple somewhat more normal school years and a couple more years to actually implement the resources and use the resources and follow the Literacy Act before we start holding kids back or, blaming schools or teachers. So that's the rationale behind it. I don't see any massive push from educators to, absolve themselves of responsibility or accountability. I don't think that's the case at all. But as per usual in right-wing media, they like to come up with their own narratives and their own tropes that they can run with, one of which, of course, in Alabama is the perennial fear and hatred of the Alabama Education Association, the AEA. And I won't go too deep on that beyond just saying the AEA that exists on the pages of Yellowhammer and on right-wing radio is very, very far from the reality that exists with AEA.
Yeah.
I wish AEA was the militant, progressive, all-power, puppet master in Montgomery that they make them out to be, but it's pretty far from the case. So that's all I have to say there. Lots of good news, but lots of work to be done. And what I would like to see is educators coming together to organize and build a bottom-up grassroots movement, to build on these kind of victories, but to really expand elsewhere and to start to link up our needs for public schools with our broader public good. Because until we start to address that, we're always going to be under fire. We're always going to have a huge target on our back. Every year, these statistics come out and say, well, Alabama's 49th, or Alabama's 50th, Alabama's 51st. Every year these come out, it only gives more ammunition for the privatizers and for the corporate reformers and all the union busters, everyone else who's aligned against public education and aligned against public sector workers. Until we address that, we're always going to be fighting from the defensive.
Right.
And that's why it's important that educators have a movement that can link up with a broader working class movement to start to address the deep poverty in this state, the lack of health care in this state, the lack of jobs and unions and infrastructure and transportation in this state, a racist police state that over-incarcerates our brothers and sisters, the parents of these children, and so on. And so I think those are the types of the areas that we have to look at moving forward. So good news to report, but a lot to work on. And, we'll stay tuned. Stay tuned, especially next year. All this bad shit that just barely didn't make it, it'll be coming back with a vengeance, and we'll have to fight that much harder to keep it out.
Yep, absolutely. So the NLRB General Counsel Jennifer Abruzzo has issued a memo requesting that the board find captive audience meetings illegal, as the NLRA offers.
That's huge.
Yeah, huge. But and the reasoning for this is that the NLRA offers workers the right to engage or not to engage in a union campaign. Thus, captive audience meetings constitute coercive participation in an anti-union campaign and should be illegal under the National Labor Relations Act. I mean, yeah, Adam said it. If this goes through, it would be huge. Absolutely. Because, when I was down there, I took off work for a week to make house visits with RWDSU in Bessemer during the campaign. And, a lot, I mean, you could just tell how many captive audience meetings these people had been through because all of the questions that they were asking me was just stock anti-union propaganda. I mean, no originality to it, no, it was stock anti-union propaganda. And the, workers should not be made to listen to it. Employers should not be able to utilize their power over workers in the workplace to preach at them.
To lie to them. Explicitly lie.
Yeah, I mean, people would be absolutely up in arms if, and rightfully so, if Democrats had the ability to force people into an auditorium to listen to their drivel at the cost of their livelihoods, right? We wouldn't accept that in a civilized society. We would not accept that we would not accept being forced to listen to one side in an election and that side having our bank account in their hands.
I mean,
we wouldn't accept that.
Right. That's what we criticize other countries for doing all the time.
Right,
I mean, you name the country, if they've ever been considered a bad guy by the State Department and the mainstream media, that's one of the things they throw at them, is that, their elections are unfair, their thumb is on the scale, it's not free, they don't actually have a fair opportunity to choose their leaders. And if we conducted political elections the way we conduct union elections, as you said, it would be completely unacceptable. And our elections are bad enough as it is, but the union elections and what the bosses can get away with is obscene.
And this is, there's going to be people say, oh, free speech, free speech, free speech. I should be able to do whatever I want. This isn't saying that the boss can't lie to their workers, that they can't misrepresent the truth to their workers, that they can't tell their side.
They still will.
They still will, and they still can. It's just saying that you should not be able to tie your workers to a chair and force them at threat of termination and therefore at threat of starvation, of homelessness, of death. If somebody has a pre-existing health condition, you should not be able to force a person at the point of a gun to listen to your drivel. Union organizers can't do that. Pro-union employees can't do that. We have to talk to people that are willing to talk to us. If people don't want to talk to us, they don't have to. They don't have to listen. They can say, no, I'm not interested, and shut the door, and we'll go on our way. If we call them, they can just hang up the phone, and we'll go on our way. These captive audience meetings do not provide for the free choice of the worker to say no. The worker should have the freedom of expression, the freedom of choice, the freedom of association to say, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in this. I do not want to participate in your anti-union campaign. And that should be a freedom. That should be the freedom that we're concerned with protecting, not the freedom of the boss to coerce their employees. That is not a legitimate freedom. That's not a freedom that I'm interested in at all. I'm interested in the freedom of the workers to choose to organize themselves or to not organize themselves, or to organize themselves in the way in which they see fit. That's the freedom that I'm interested in pursuing, in protecting, not the freedom of the boss to coerce their employees. So this is going to be huge, but no doubt it's going to be challenged in the courts. And with this insane reactionary anti-worker pro-business court, I mean, I don't know. I'm almost worried that they're going to just try to throw out the whole NLRA, but we'll see.
Yeah, I am concerned about that as well. But, we'll take the victories where we can. And I think we've said it on the show before, but I have to say, Jennifer Abruzzo may be the best thing to come out of Joe Biden.
Yeah,
so
for
far.
sure.
There's not a lot of good stuff coming out of that White House, but that's one where I'll give him the credit.
Yeah, absolutely. So Elon Musk bought Twitter last week. And Alabama bosses and other weirdos are extremely excited. They're extremely excited for being on a Twitter where you can say the N-word, but you can't be mean to your boss. Because that's the kind of Twitter that Elon Musk would create if he could. So that's great.
Yeah, that about says it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the amount of wealth that these people have in this country is, I mean, we should take it from them because there are better things that can be done with it than sending a billionaire to the edge of space. But also for reasons like this, so that a properly motivated this properly motivated wealthy person just bought themselves a seat on the board of one of the most important public forums in the country. What? It's not good for democracy for wealthy people to have so much power. It's just not, it's not legitimate.
When they can single-handedly reshape the media landscape. I mean, and this is a person who has repeatedly violated Twitter's own policies, someone who's repeatedly committed violations of the National Labor Relations Act as well as SEC regulations on Twitter.
Right.
And my understanding, at least based on reporting from Means Morning News this week, is that he even committed an SEC violation in this purchase by not disclosing it soon enough. But, don't hold your breath for some sort of accountability.
Yeah. But, it is... And everything that I'm saying goes for like Jack Dorsey or the other owners of Twitter, for Zuckerberg over Facebook, for China over TikTok. Like these people should not have so much control over the conversation in the United States. Like it's illegitimate. It's illegitimate. And so we should take their power away from them. They shouldn't have it. They should not. They should not have that power. But the people that see Elon Musk as a free speech warrior, why do they see him as a free speech warrior? Why are they excited for a Twitter that has Elon Musk at the helm? It's because they believe that he will defend their right to, on Twitter, say racist and bigoted and reactionary things. And maybe people should be able to say that, but maybe, I don't know, people should be able to say, like, I don't think that we should throw people in jail for being racist. I don't think that we should throw people in jail for being bigoted. There's a certain amount of, like, Nazis need free speech too, but Elon Musk is not concerned with freedom of speech for working people. And that is the freedom of speech, the free speech fight that reactionaries who have taken up the mantle of fighting for free speech over the last several years, that is the real free speech fight in this country. That's the free speech fight that is even happening at Tesla. I mean, we covered a couple weeks ago the More Perfect Union reporting on how people have been fired for organizing a union. People have been disciplined for organizing a union. People have been fired for speaking up about racism in the workplace at Tesla.
Let some Tesla workers tweet about their working conditions and their bosses, and to see how Mr. Free Speech comes to their aid.
Yeah.
You're so right that the whole debate around freedom of speech
it's so distorted because the conversation is
out of touch with our reality as working people.
The conversation is all about whether or not a millionaire has his book listed on Amazon or a billionaire has a Twitter account or not. When these people represent such a minority of what people are materially facing when it comes to their right to express themselves in this country, because it is, I mean, infinitely more. If you could find a graph last year, of all the people who were fired, and what does being fired mean? Being fired means you lose your, you could lose your house. You could lose your health care. You could become homeless. Being fired. All the people who were fired for speaking out about discrimination, for organizing a union, for just because their boss had piss in his Cheerios that morning for no reason at all.
Think about Chris Smalls, who was advocating for COVID safety protocols, and first thing they did was quarantine him and nobody else around him. Okay, he figured out something was up, and as he escalated, he was fired with a phone call. A man who had spent 4.5 years, dedicated his life to that company. That's the reality of freedom of speech in this country.
If you put a graph of all of those people next to the graph of all of the free speech stories that get circulated on right-wing loser media, the second bar, I don't even think you could see it. But that is what the conversation is focused on. And that's because they don't want you to think about all this other stuff, because if you think about all this other stuff, you're going to be pissed off at the boss, you're going to be pissed off at Republicans, at Democrats, at corporate executives, at politicians, instead of being pissed off at like immigrants or, gay people on Twitter. Because that's who they want you to be pissed off at. They want you to be pissed off at the gays or the immigrants instead of the bosses, and that is that's why, we want to do everything that we can to recenter the actual to bring people back down to earth, to reality about what is actually happening with people's right to speak freely in this country, because the most people face restrictions on their right to freely express themselves in the workplace, not on Twitter or not on Facebook. And the restrictions that they face in the workplace have much more serious ramifications. So the slap. Will Smith slapped Chris Rock into next week or last week or next year or whatever the thing is. And the thing about that is that after that, celebrities crossed a picket line. That's the thing about that. I don't really care so much about the first thing, but celebrities crossed a picket line, and that's what we should be talking about, and nobody's talking about it except for places like In These Times, which is great. So the Chateau's owner, Chateau Marmont, however you pronounce it, Jay-Z had a big party there, and their owner, which is a famous hotelier, Andre Belaz. All these names are just BS. Oh my God, so pretentious.
They sound bourgeois.
Good grief. They have been accused of abusive treatment and sexual harassment by several employees, which, of course the owner denies. Black and Latino workers have also accused managers of discrimination and using racial slurs. There's been a union campaign at this place, and there was a picket line while they were so they were on strike. They were picketing, and they had asked Jay-Z prior to, right? It wasn't like they just expected them to turn around with no notice. They actually reached out to the publicist of all these people and said, first to Jay-Z and said, hey, could you please have your millionaire billionaire bash literally freaking anywhere else?
Just find a hotel, any hotel that's not under a union boycott.
Yeah.
And do it there.
Literally freaking anything else. And Jay-Z refused, and a lot of these celebrities cross the picket line.
I'm kind of disappointed in some of them. Some of them I was a little surprised by, like, Rosario Dawson is someone who's been pro-labor, and there were a few other, Questlove, there were a few others that sort of caught me by surprise, and I'm guessing that they had to have known what they were doing.
Oh, yeah.
I'll give Dawson credit. She said that she arrived at the hotel after the picketers were gone, and that she didn't know about it, and that she does stand with the union and will not go back to that hotel until the union gets what they deserve. So good for her. Don't know if anyone else has actually put out a statement like that.
In these times reported that they have not put, and no one else has reported out a statement. But yeah, Rosario Dawson, who supported Bernie Sanders, Janelle Monáe, Zoe Kravitz, who was recently the Catwoman, Timothy Chalamet, my girlfriend.
Not the Dune boy. My
girlfriend's going to be really sad about that one.
The boy from Dune.
Yeah. So, sorry, Ryan. No more Timothy Chalamet movies.
He's canceled.
He is canceled. He's canceled.
See, okay, here we are, being cancel culture.
Yeah, we
folks.
just talked about free speech, and now we're canceling celebrities. Jesus. What? We've become everything that we hate. Michael B. Jordan, Rihanna, Emily Ratajkowski.
I can never pronounce her name, but she was a big Bernie supporter.
She was a big Bernie
supporter. I know
supporter.
you're talking about.
Saweetie, Questlove, Daniel Kaluuya, Tiffany Haddish, Tyler Perry, Mindy Kaling of The Office fame, John Hamm, DG Khaled, and Kim Kardashian.
John Hamm, really, man, you're one of the best actors out there on TV, and you're going to cross a union picket line. That was his Mad Men
and all these
era.
people.
That was Mad Men seeping into his behavior, maybe. I want to believe. He was just channeling his Don Draper business executive character. I want to believe that.
All these people, I mean, I don't really know how it is with, I know with actors, basically every actor is a member of SAG-AFTRA. I don't know if, like, musicians probably aren't members of unions, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on the, obviously, like, classical musicians and those in symphonies and orchestras are usually.
But people, like these actors, Timothy Chalamet, Michael B. Jordan,
they ought to know
Tyler
better.
Perry, Mindy Kaling, these people should know better. Kim Kardashian, of course, not surprised by that. Yeah. So, I mean, and like Will Smith, it was just announced last week, Will Smith has been barred from the Academy for like 10 years. For 10 years. And, I don't know, maybe that's fine. I don't think that they did they ever revoke the membership of child rapist Roman Polanski or
all the other
serial rapists,
all the
Harvey
Weinstein
ones. I don't know. So I don't know. Maybe it's legitimate to bar him for 10 years. Like, I don't know. I don't really care. But these folks, if he's banned for 10 years, these folks should be banned for like 20 years. But they won't be.
I do want to make sure we recognize some of the folks who did honor the picket line and who endorsed the boycott by the union. That includes folks like Jane Fonda.
Yeah.
Not really surprised
Tom
there.
Morello.
No surprises there. But Gabrielle Union, Adam McKay, Amanda Seyfried, Sarah
Spike
Silverman,
Lee.
Martin Sheen, Spike Lee, Alfonso Cuarón, one of the best directors out there today. So there were some folks, some good talented actors and directors and entertainers who were very explicit in endorsing the union boycott, and shout out to them.
Yep.
Make a little mental note.
Yep. So up next, Starbucks workers are just, and we've only got one more story after this, so we're going to be wrapping up here soon, but Starbucks workers are just absolutely demolishing. They're owning the bosses. Just yesterday, they won 4 elections with a total of 4 no votes across all 4 locations. A total rout.
Love to see it.
Yeah,
folks.
we love to see it. Right before that, right before those elections, the Starbucks general counsel was let go, was fired, with an $8 million severance.
Good grief.
I
didn't know that.
$8 million. $8 million severance. Man, these people failing up. I mean, could you, like, I'm not going to get $8 million if I screw up my job and totally fail at what I was supposed to do.
Hell, I'll never see $8 million, period. I'll never know what that looks like. I could live off that for the rest of my life and feel just fine. And to get that as a part of being fired because you sucked at your job so badly that you keep losing time after time. Oh, God. Yeah.
Man. Is crazy. The NLRB is coming through as well. There's been a lot of complaints about the NLRB from the Starbucks Workers Union, but I'm a bit like, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a Fed, but I'm inclined to be a bit more sympathetic to the NLRB than maybe the Starbucks Workers United are. They're talking about like how, the NLRB is like aiding and abetting basically Starbucks anti-union campaign. But, we just talked to Joe last week about how the NLRB has been flat funded for years. It's been defunded.
It's got its hands tied.
It's got its hands tied for a lot. And there was, oh man, I wish I just remembered this. But like in fiscal year 2020, they reinstated 900 workers, I think. I think that's what it was, or maybe it was 600. And in fiscal year 2021, they had 6,000 workers reinstated. I saw that the other day in an article. I mean, that's a lot.
I see it a lot like I see the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission.
Yeah,
that's where your civil rights complaints go.
Right.
And I think in both agencies there are some people who are decent, well-meaning people who are trying to do the right thing and are there for the purpose of the agency, which is to help ordinary people, but for various reasons related to their budgets and related to their organization's leaders and designs, the politicians who have boxed them in. For all these reasons and more, they're not going to be the agencies that we would like to see in terms of how fast they move or how resolute they are in standing on the side of us as normal, ordinary working people.
Right.
So,
but you don't work for the NLRB, right? You don't apply for a job at the NLRB if you want to hamper union organizing.
Right.
That's just not like, you just wouldn't do that.
Right.
So I'm inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt, give the workers, the field examiners, the attorneys at the NLRB. But it is important to recognize the limitations of the institution.
Which we've talked about a lot and how broken our labor law is. And that's another part of it is, these agencies can only operate within the confines they have. And until we change some of these backwards laws and until we add some of the protections that should have been included from the get-go, it'll be an uphill battle.
Right. Yeah, but the and just like last week, the NLRB said that the firing of the Memphis 7, who we talked to, you can go back and watch our interview with them, they said that was illegal. Starbucks is, of course, going to challenge that, but that's a big deal. So Howard Schultz, as a result of Starbucks Workers United just absolutely dog-walking the bosses, he has taken over at Starbucks in an attempt to right the ship and to get the union out. And in an address to stakeholders last week, he had this to say. Adam, let's go ahead and play that clip.
Here's where it gets a little sensitive, because I've been coached a little bit, but I do want to talk about something pretty serious. We can't ignore what is happening in the country as it relates to companies throughout the country being assaulted in many ways by the threat of unionization. Now,
the threat.
Yeah, being assaulted by the threat of unionization. And that actually ties really well with that's funny, because I just saw that tweet from Mel yesterday about union organizers being compared to jihadi insurgents in Iraq. But that pairs really nicely because here we've got this guy talking about being assaulted by workers wanting to have a say over their working conditions. Being assaulted. This guy has probably never been hit in his life. Talking about being assaulted by baristas wanting fair working conditions and wanting a say on the job. I mean, Jesus, man, that's crazy. And so Jordan Zacharin of More Perfect Union pointed out a bit of irony on Twitter. Let's put out that first tweet from Jordan, or the first half of that tweet. He said, Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz today said that the company was, quote, threatened by the assault of unionization. And now let's go to the second half of that tweet. An hour later, Starbucks fired union leader Layla Dalton for trying to protect herself from ongoing harassment by managers.
And she's just one of several of the activists and organizers who've been terminated by Starbucks. We've talked to some on this show. And these firings are continuing. And so, yeah, I do hope that they're reinstated, but it should never happen in the first place. And that's the kind of assault that really hurts people, to lose your job, to be fired in retaliation for speaking up. That hurts people on a very base level, material, physical level. It hits people on a mental and spiritual level as well.
Yeah. It's, I mean, how do you not see the irony of talking about language of violence? Language of violence. I'm being assaulted by my workers coming together and associating with one another, and then firing somebody.
You know, we were talking before the show about this, and it's funny how he even mentions, hey, I've been coached. We know for a fact he's spending millions to get advice from lawyers and union busters and consultants, PR people. He has all these, ostensibly smart, accomplished people that he's paying very well to tell him how to not say stupid shit. And yet he's so narcissistic. He can't help himself. He has to say stupid shit. That's kind of a boss in a nutshell.
Yep, that's about it. So the last thing that we want to talk about is this Intercept article. It's just amazing. It's really something else. An Amazon worker chat app. So Amazon is developing this app that would ban words like union, restrooms, pay raise, plantation, freedom, slave labor. I mean, banning freedom. They're literally banning freedom.
That reminds me of that union busting video we watched. It's been a couple months now, but we watched one, maybe it was Lowe's or Home Depot, where one of the phrases to be aware of, it was like respect and dignity.
Those are banned too.
Right, yeah. So, if you're a manager somewhere and folks start talking about respect and dignity, watch out.
Yep. Yeah, you gotta watch out. I mean, man, it's really, really amazing. Like, and oh yeah, that's right, Treo. I mean, one of the things that they said is one of the things that they're banning is concerned. Like, some of this language is not just like that they're banning isn't just like, oh, I want to be able to like talk crap about the boss or talk crap about the company. I mean, like, you could imagine a situation where somebody says, I'm concerned about something, and
hey, I'm concerned the restroom is flooding.
Yeah, the restroom is flooding, or like a beam fell from the ceiling and I'm concerned, or I'm concerned about this package not going. I mean, there's like there's practical reasons that you would use these words. And what happens, what the leak has shown is that this app would just not send messages that contain these words. Like it would just send it into a black hole, and the sender and the person who is on the receiving end of it would not be notified that the message was not sent. People who were slated to receive the message would never know that it didn't send, and people who sent the message would never know that it wasn't received.
But the company would know.
The
company would know,
course,
and they would
yeah.
know that you sent that and or try to send that.
Yeah.
It's pretty dystopian.
Yeah. But, they weren't talking about that on Right Wing Radio last week, though. They had more important things to talk about, like how, schools aren't blasting prayers at their attendees of their ball games, or let's see, what's some other things? Caving to the left by removing prayer, discussing the cowards in the Jefferson County School Board. I mean, multiple hours spent on that, and Amazon is banning freedom. But they don't want to call attention to that because that might make people want to do something about it. So, got to be quiet about it. Yeah, well, that's about it. That's about it for the show today.
We've had a full slate.
Yeah, we had a full slate. It was a good show today. I do enjoy. I enjoy being able to be live and be able to see the. Interact with the chat.
Absolutely. And, have kind of the more structured first half of the show on FM radio and a little bit looser format here online where we
Y'all got to call us, though. Y'all got to call us. We pay for this.
Yeah,
phone line.
Leave us voicemails if nothing else.
If nothing else, you got to leave us a voicemail. But we pay for the phone line. We pay like what is it? 3 cents a second to have this phone line open during the show? Y'all aren't calling us. You got to give us a call, make it worth our while. But Adam, you had a couple things you wanted to plug before we left.
Sure. Those of you who've been listening for a while, you may know and remember that we do try to plug local events here in North Alabama, in the Tennessee Valley. So if there's anything good going on in the community, whether it's statewide or here at the local level, please share with us so we can plug it as well, and hopefully expand the reach, expand the audience of those events. So a few good things that are happening that I wanted to make sure we plugged, starting with an hour and 15 minutes from now, Hometown Action. Today, April 9th at 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. They are doing hometown routes, where we've been and where we're going. Join Hometown Action and Hometown Organizing Project members and supporters for a virtual statewide gathering today. Hometown Action is building a multiracial, working class, trans, queer affirming movement for racial, gender, economic, and climate justice, and organizing the people power to win inclusive and sustainable rural and small communities across Alabama. So from 2 to 4, you'll hear what they've been up to over the past year and be part of planning their 2022 campaigns. And they will have a casual social hour from 4 to 5. So if you get a chance, check out Hometown Action. You can find the link. You can get involved there. The next event I wanted to plug would be Music for Mechanics, which is coming up Sunday, April 24th at 1 p.m. through 8:30 p.m. It's going to be all day or all afternoon, all evening. Join Blues to Bluegrass, the North Alabama School for Organizers, and our wonderful friends Spice Radio as they raise money for the free automotive clinic up here in the Huntsville area. So there'll be great free music all afternoon, raffle drawings, great food and beer at the Stove House. Live streaming will be provided by Spice Radio Huntsville, and this is all to raise money for the automotive free clinic here in the Huntsville area. So good opportunity to socialize, hear some good music, and support a good cause. There are 2 events coming up by the League of Women Voters that I wanted to mention. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan group. Some really, really sweet ladies, many of whom I've met over the years as an activist, who are dedicated and really try to give back to their community. So the first one actually involves another friend of the show who was on earlier today, Daniel Tate. So the League of Women Voters has an environmental education series, and they are hosting one called The Climate Crisis in Alabama, Impacts and Renewable Energy Solutions. That will be Tuesday, May 3rd at 6:30 p.m. They're going to be joined by Scott Duncan, who will review the causes of climate change, the current and future impacts on the Southeast, and what our goals should be in response. Daniel Tate of Energy Alabama will discuss the importance of utilizing clean energy here in Alabama, addressing the urgency related to climate change, along with other challenges such as energy affordability and economic growth, by describing the economic and environmental risk of a continued reliance on fossil fuels in the power and transportation sectors, especially considering the context of Ukraine and COVID. Daniel will stress the great need of a swift transition to a renewable energy economy. So that's, again, May 3rd, 6:30 p.m. I know there's a Facebook event for that. And the other event by the League of Women Voters is a voter services drive. And I know they do these pretty regular in the community. So the League of Women Voters of Tennessee Valley is doing a drive-up, walk-up voter services event Saturday, April 16th from 1 to 4 p.m. at the North Huntsville Public Library. That's the one on Sparkman. And the following services will be provided free of charge: voter registration, absentee ballot applications, witness for absentee ballot affidavit envelopes, photo ID copying service, election reminder text, and voter guides. If you're trying to apply for an absentee ballot, don't forget to bring some form of photo ID. So again, Saturday, April 16th, 1 to 4 in the afternoon. If you need some help getting ready to vote in the elections this summer, there's an opportunity. And then finally, I wanted to point of personal privilege, I wanted to plug a recent episode from our friends at the Real News Network. On April 8th, yesterday, they hosted a conversation with Sarah Nelson, who is, of course, the international president of the Flight Attendants Union with CWA AFL-CIO, as well as another friend of the show, historian and professor Harvey J. Kay. And the episode is called From Amazon to Starbucks, Workers Are Rising Up, and Progressives Need to Support Them at All Costs. I love that episode. It really got me in the mood for today. So if you haven't checked that out, highly recommend it. Those are two people who had some important perspectives to share on kind of where we're at with organized labor in this country, right on the heels of these amazing wins in Starbucks and Amazon, as well as the long ongoing struggles such as our brothers and sisters in Brookwood at Warrior Met Coal. So that's all I have for today. I really appreciate everybody tuning in.
Yeah, Trejo in the chat said that the Hometown Action event is postponed to Tuesday, May the 10th.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. Appreciate it. Anytime there's stuff like this going on in the community, y'all let us know. DM us, tweet at us, email us, whatever. However you want to get in touch with us. Leave us a voicemail, perhaps. But please do keep us involved. I try to, see what's going on out there. I know Jacob does as well, but we're just us. And so it takes a collective effort to make the community aware of what all's going on out there, because there are a lot of people who are doing good work, but often we're doing it kind of in our own silos and not always linking up with each other and sharing our efforts and collaborating. So hope to do that with our show. It's something we try to do, and we're going to keep working at. And anyone who if you tuned in today and you're not already subscribed to the YouTube channel, if you're not already liking us or following us on Facebook and Twitter, if you haven't already subscribed on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast, please do that. That's an easy thing you can do to help support the show. Give us a review or a rating on the apps. That always helps. If you can like the videos as we release them on YouTube, those little things do make a difference. We have to play the algorithm game just like anybody else online. And, I certainly, Jacob and I know that not everybody's in a position to contribute financially. Those of you who are and who do that, it really means a lot. It gives us the means to continue doing this project. And so if you do believe that we need pro-union, pro-labor, working class media by and for working class people here in the Tennessee Valley, please contribute how you can. We appreciate it a lot.
Yep. So that's going to be it. Thanks for your time. Like he said, if you want to help us stay on the air, you want to buy a new hat, you can visit our website, tvlr.fm, to find that stuff. Share and follow on social media. Don't forget to review and subscribe on your podcasting app of choice. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, share your thoughts on the content of today's episode, ask us a question, or share a union win or a bad boss story, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller, and we will see you next week.